it's all
you?
for the broadcast. You just
Oh,
Wow, we're
can't.
just looking at a
What,
green
what about
square.
us, bro? Like, I
Yeah,
want to look at you. I feel like I'm talking to a person, you know?
yeah.
I'm
I'm
here. I'm
looking
Not a
at
just.
this.
fucking.
I just can't be arsed to mess with the settings and get it all done right.
Look at a teal square. It's not. I said green, but it's actually just a teal square. Even worse.
Yeah, I will say
Ah,
it is a toughie just because you also get the issue of like your hardware being used by more than one thing. So I would need to like stream into OBS and then like give you guys the like redirect feed or whatever, where it's like pulling from OBS instead of pulling from my camera, and I don't want to set it up. All right, but
all
yeah,
right.
that
Are
being
you like
said,
the moderator? Are you gonna like prompt the questions, or should we
I'm
read the
gonna yeah.
chat
So
here?
we're live now. I'm basically just the kind of answerer, prompter, conversation organizer, just kind of a multi-role situation here. So we're now live.
Nice.
For everyone who's tuning in, welcome to what I think we're calling Digging Deep, but I'm not sure. A bit of a working title, work in progress. But basically, it's just a Q&A
Oh
segment for
god.
us. Yeah, I didn't pick the name, but we're kind of just rolling with it until a better one just manifests, because that's kind of the nature of this stuff. But
Perfect.
basically, it's just a Q&A series. I've got Raz here. I've got eXyu with us. We're going to be answering questions. Obviously, a lot of folks saw the kind of interview quotes and highlights with Lawrence this past weekend after our games. So I wanted to kind of speak to that a little bit, and also just kind of like the season. It's still going. We still have our match against Sin this coming weekend, but obviously the results for us are that we're not making playoffs, and our season kind of ends this Sunday after our match. So kind of speaking to the kind of end of our run, how things went, some of the behind the scenes stuff, and kind of speaking to like what worked, what didn't, and obviously any other questions that folks have in the chat to kind of go along, we're happy to answer along the way. And I'm sure Raz has a bunch of stuff in his back pocket too for questions.
Yeah, I do.
Cool.
And I'll let the fans, of course, like chime in with their questions. I'll piggyback as well, just anything that comes from them, like with supported questions, if you like, just depending on your answer. And yeah, we'll see where we go from there.
Mhm. Cool. Yeah, so I think one of the first questions is a tough question from Leondos, where it's if it was known a player didn't get along before building the roster, was there any specific reason the roster was built with those players as the core? So I wouldn't say that our players like truly don't get along. Like for example, after most scrim days, like we actually just play board games and hang out and stuff like that. So like I think it's less so not getting along. And the things that happened were more of just like not seeing eye to eye in scrims, not seeing eye to eye on like how to play the game, or just having those kinds of conversations that weren't always productive in reviews and stuff like that, which like isn't a thing that was like known ahead of time that was like guaranteed going to happen. That's one of those things that kind of just happens as the season progresses for a lot of teams, and you kind of can't exactly know how all the dynamics are going to mesh until you're already in the middle of a season or prepping your scrims for the season and stuff like that. And this was definitely stuff that like didn't come up nearly as much in lock-in, just because I think a lot of that tournament was just like, week 1 we have subs, week 2 we like just get our players, week 3 we finally find our footing, and then it ends. So there wasn't really time to like isolate any specific issues or problems until we kind of came back for spring.
Yeah, I guess I can probably maybe should we just like bounce off that
Yeah,
one?
and also say like Lawrence,
Quickly?
feel free to like hop in if there's any like
Yeah.
context you want to add or ideas or thoughts or anything like that for anything.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think like generally people don't dislike each other as people ever in League. It's very rare. Like
Yeah.
usually outside of League, everyone is able to get along. But I think the problems always arise when it comes to like gameplay related things and review and just getting on the same page. And I think, like John said, that's something we've definitely struggled a lot with as a team. And I think that's when the personal relationships, if they're not strong enough to begin with, start to crumble. Is when like you can't see eye to eye in game at all.
Question that I have is like generally how does conflict resolution on the team usually go? Because at least from my experience, a lot of the times it depends on if the coaches are a big like figure in trying to mend relations. If like mostly in-game stuff, you're right, because mostly it does spawn from in-game stuff. But if there's anything that can deteriorate and how someone like explains feedback, if they do it really poorly, or if they're even talking to another person on the member, is that something like how does it work within the team? I would probably send this towards eXyu because
Yeah, I would say
you
Lawrence, you're
you
probably
know
the best one to start with this one,
yeah.
then I can follow up after.
Like specifically with our team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the intention behind our team, at least the way I saw it, was that it was going to be led by the veterans and like kind of the core of NRG. And so that's kind of what it was. I think like FBI has very clear ideas of how he wants to play the game, and I think his ideas are pretty good. And I think a lot of our team agrees with his ideas. So that's kind of the trend that, like, as a team, I thought we would trend in the direction of like kind of listening to him and trying to build on his ideas.
Mhm.
But I think not everyone bought into that same mindset. So the reviews became really difficult. And I think even if you have two good ideas, I'm not saying they're both good ideas, but if you have two good ideas, it's more important that you just agree on one and go with that as a team instead of like trying to split and do both the good ideas. And I think that was one of our biggest problems as a team is that we failed to agree on one good idea in most games.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think like normally conflict resolution in terms of like when there is conflict, when there's disagreement, like the coaches come in, they try and like not necessarily say like who's right, who's wrong, but like again, point out what Lauren said of just like it's better for us to pick either an in between or one of these two ideas and just do it as a group, because if we don't, we're going to end up disconnected, disjointed, and whatever we do is not going to pan out. So usually it was like the coaches would jump in and try and kind of like diffuse things as best they could and get us to like take a conclusion from it. But at the end of the day, if it's all stemming from like, not seeing the game the same way, or like, once you start losing a bunch of games, there's like an element of like distrust, or potentially like, I think a certain player does a certain thing wrong on my team, so in order to compensate for that, I'm going to change how I play. And then all of a sudden, like
Yeah.
the calculus of everything starts to get a little messed up. So I definitely think like that's how things tend to go on teams that lose a lot, and we kind of fell victim to a good chunk of those. And some of them are, just like the psychology of a pro player, right? There's only so much you can realistically do to like change the mindset while you're, just getting constant negative reinforcement on everything you do no matter what. So it's like you're kind of fighting a losing battle, but you still have to fight it, which we tried our
Yeah.
best, but obviously results wise just couldn't get there.
Did you feel as though, because did you feel as though you were finding alignment out of reviews, and then it was like in game, like on stage, there would still be like you would still find issues in which you guys are doing two different things at the same time, or not really
No,
aligned? Like,
no,
mhm.
the problem stemmed from reviews. I actually think we're on stage we perform better than we do in scrims, which
Mm.
is saying a lot considering our stage results. But I think like in scrims, well, okay, I think our early games in scrims are pretty dominant.
Yeah.
I think we're actually pretty good, and I think the issues we show on stage with our mid game are super noticeable in scrims because we can throw 13k leads, we can throw 10k, we can throw any lead, and so I think when you keep having that happen, like John said, there's like a lack of trust. And then what you were asking earlier about like, are these issues scrim related or like can we resolve them? Like I felt like for the majority of situations, the conclusion was often like, fine, I'll do it without accepting the
Oh,
reasoning.
yeah.
Or it was like, I agree to disagree. And in that case, there was no conclusion and it was just, let's just hope next time goes better.
Yeah.
But it would take like 30 or 40 minutes to get to even that conclusion. And so kind of our whole review would be spent on that, and then we wouldn't really everyone would be kind of tilted going into the next game because there was no resolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also when that kind of stuff like hogs the review time, it's like I'm sure there's something that someone wanted to talk about in the game, whether it's a coach or another player. And so like when that just becomes like the black hole of just like a dumb conversation spawns in, it's like it's just very draining to the room to be like, okay, I didn't get to go over my point. I didn't get to like see how like why we lost a team fight that I felt was really good, or like why was that objective set up bad, even though like we got there early and had vision. Like what happened that I didn't see that I want to see as a team. And so
Yeah.
like that can also add more frustration to it. So I think a lot of it just came down to like we just didn't do a good job using our review times and stuff like that, and didn't get folks on the same page. But obviously like there's some element that's like, the structure of like how we're doing things is also something that we can adjust. Like I know going into like this week, we're kind of doing our end of split interviews with like coaches talking to players, and then the players talking to me, and then also me talking to the coaches. So like everyone's kind of getting an opportunity to like share around a bunch of feedback. So we're going to kind of like dissect like how best we can handle it, and where it's just a person like a personnel like, hey, you can't do this anymore type of thing, because it's obviously like there is a line in the sand where at a certain point, like if someone's being argumentative or frustrating, like you kind of just have to be like, hey, you can't do that, like not like or else, but like there
Mhm.
is a line that which when we cross, it's no longer like worth our time to try and fix the problem for you. It's like you kind of just have to own it and do it yourself.
Mhm. Sounds good. I mean, we can go into the next question now since we pretty much hit this one a
Yeah, yeah.
lot.
So the next one I see on my list is at what point does being a loser org matter? Dig hasn't been top 5 in over 8 years. Even if most of the staff and players are new, doesn't that just kind of feel bad? Yeah, and I mean, I think this is like something that once things got bad and we had to just like, diffuse with humor and do what we can to like kind of like smile through the pain. That's something we kind of like internally would joke about a lot. I know like even like the dig season stuff back when Sven was on the team was kind of like that was them joking that like, the team hadn't been good in a while, but like this is our year, it's dig season. So like I think every struggling team finds like a self-deprecating way to kind of make fun of themselves, and for us it was kind of like joking about like, oh, dig's got like an evil curse put on them, and so like, what could we do, like, that kind of stuff. But it's very much like not in the serious sense. It's more of the like, hey, let's diffuse the tension and try and like get everyone laughing and smiling and having a good time, because obviously we know we're not in a great spot and we have shit to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with like the whole we use it as a way to diffuse the tension, but that was actually one of my biggest gripes when I first joined Dig
Yeah.
a few years ago, was that like everyone kind of jokes about Dig being shit, and I think we do it as on this team, and I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I think we need something to laugh about in this
Yeah.
in our Chungus lives, so like, it's good. But I actually think as a competitor, it's like really bad to have that mindset. I actually why Dig keep failing is that as even when we cycle in new people, because I've been around with like many rosters of Dig and many iterations of like just people, and I think like it's the same thing. Everyone comes and they're like, "Wow, Dig always loses," and then when we lose, it's like, "Aha, like Dig always loses," and then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I feel like it's really frustrating. I think when I was a rookie, I was really mad about it because like I wanted to be the change to the org, and I
Yeah.
feel like now it's almost like I'm numb to it, but it's still disappointing to see, and I think as someone who wants to succeed on the org that keeps giving me a chance, it's like it's hard, but like you have to do it to see some joy in the day.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely agree with it.
hmm.
I think it's one of those things where like you always try and push back on it from like the management side, but at a certain point, like when the roots take hold, it's like if that's the well people keep going to, like you're not gonna get them to stop without like a very intentional like, hey, we need to talk about this and stop doing it. But obviously, I don't think we were ever in a position to fully like nip that in the bud and like not do it with how the year was going already.
I have like it feels like two questions because
Hmm.
it's towards two different audiences. I'll start with the first one, which is like towards the team itself. How do you push a more winning culture? Because it happens in every sports team, like for instance, the Washington Wizards in like the NBA, where you want to be able to push like a winning culture so that the mentality of like, I'm joining this org, it's doomed for me, or the feeling of, hey, I want to be the change. How do you push that within a squad like this? What was your goal, I guess, eXyu? And I think for the GM side, what is your goal in trying to be able to push a new team culture?
I think for me, it always starts at the top. I would say I've never really been like a leader on an LCS team, mostly because I'm usually one of the newer players. But I think for me, the people who are like the leaders of the team kind of need to push that culture. And I think it's underestimated how much value a leader can have on the impact, like on the team's culture. And I think in League, a lot of the people that I imagined were leaders that I've played with in the past have been relatively disappointing in that sense in terms of setting the team culture. And it kind of sounds like an excuse because obviously I can try to do it, but at the same time, it's a social environment. So you don't want to be the outcast that's like, hey guys, let's not make fun of Dignitas when
Yeah.
everyone is making fun of Dignitas. So um, yeah, it's a tough balance. I don't really know, honestly. I mean, that's been the problem with Dig. So if someone
Mhm.
knew, it would be good.
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. I think, at least in my experience, it's one of those things where, like, once it happens within a season, you're kind of stuck to have it. And usually, it's only a thing that catches on in a team, to Lawrence's point, if someone who is like a more leader, senior voice, like someone who is like when they speak, people listen. That person, if they
Yeah.
start doing it, I don't want to say it's doomed, but it's very hard to like unlearn the behavior and like walk it all back. It's kind of like Pandora's box in that sense, especially if the
Yeah.
results aren't there. I think if you actually start reversing the trend, the joke then kind of like reverses and it becomes like, oh, we're like the only successful group at this org that hasn't been good, or like, oh, we're the ones who are like solving the curse. It kind of like can invert, but obviously you do need the results for that, which can be hard if everyone's kind of like doom posting about it the whole time. So it's like kind of can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy, or it can be like a thing that galvanizes the team when you actually start to like build some momentum.
Yeah. And for the second question, it's probably the more important one because I'm assuming it's pretty difficult if you're a player or a coach within the team and you see the community respond to your team and you're like, I haven't been on this team for years, and you are tagging the failures of the organization for the past like 5, 6, 7, to me. How do you let the audience know there is a shift? Because if at least I remember in offseason seeing the new team come through, but Jonathan, you were a new GM. Like, there's a new GM, new coaching staff. Like, my understanding was that all of the frustrations that I personally had as an analyst and as a commentator, because I'll be pretty honest, I was like, every change that happened in offseason, I would never understand. Like, I would never understand from the prior years before that. I was like, I don't know what their goals are. This time around, I was like, I understood it. And I see a new GM and I see a new coaching staff and I see the team. And I'm like, but a lot of the fans and audience members, it doesn't click with them or it doesn't reach them. How do you make it so that shift reaches the fan base
Yeah,
or the LCS fans?
I'd say it's hard, and it's one of those things where like we're starting to do more stuff like this. We're starting to try and like be more creative on how we reach people. Obviously, like whenever I'm at Riot and I pass like the analyst desk or anything in the hall, like I'm always trying to talk to you guys to be like, hey, here's like a little nugget from behind the scenes, or like, hey, if you guys need like an idea on something or like any info, like I'm always happy. Like I think Jat reached out before the season started about like, hey, what are your like expectations and like what's going on, and I kind of just reiterated what we had said publicly before, as well as like gave some information of like how everything was going behind the scenes. So like I'm always trying my best to like communicate stuff and just be transparent, especially to the folks that have like the larger microphones than I do. Like I think the biggest struggle with teams like Dignitas and others in the league is like you can only really reach the fans who you already have and the like people in your kind of sphere of influence through like your players and staff that are on the current team who again are probably supporters of those players and staff. So it's very hard to find someone who's like not in that bubble of influence and like pull them in and give them information unless either like it's a virally shared thing or something that's like part of the broadcast or something, right? And it's like I can't necessarily craft those with 100% like hit rate. It's just not going to happen. So like I have to just flood out as much information as I can. And obviously it's not something that we've like done an amazing job of. I'll take some L's on that one. Like definitely like having to find my footing a little bit in the role and figure out where the balance is. But I think like doing more Q&As, having this maybe even be like a weekly thing during the season, especially for summer, like just trying to do what I can to like keep the dialogue open so that as many people as possible have a chance at seeing it, because that's the hard part. It's just getting out of that little bubble.
Yeah. I also I have a big I'm a big fan of transparency, and I'm a big fan of connecting with audiences that might not even like you or might honestly might even hate you. I just
Yeah.
think that engaging with everyone is how you build fans. And one of my proudest things in solo queue was there was a guy who was shit talking me, and I added him, and then we talked it out, hashed it out, and he followed me on Twitter. And he's like, okay, that's a fan. I basically did a little therapy session with him,
Yeah.
why do you hate me? You're just reflecting on your, all that stuff. But I think there needs to be more authenticity in league content. That's my gripe with it. I feel like everyone gives PR ass answers and everyone is the same. So the only people that matter are the people who are winning. And not everyone can win. And I think, sometimes you have to follow the journey where the player isn't that good. And then one day they get to win. And all the people who were there with them, they get to experience that joy. I think that's really cool. And so I think for me, I think just being more transparent in content and actually trying to engage with fans instead of just trying to avoid the media when things are bad. I think that's really important.
I agree with that. I would actually even ask you, um, where would I because my personal gripe a lot of the time is that I look at teams and I don't often see the content. It could be either from a content team, or if a team doesn't have a content team, it would be like streaming or like just posting more frequently. And then I mean the most obvious example would be like I make this joke all the time. Every year that comes by, I'm like, all right, let me see what's going on in FBI's Twitter account, and it's an NRG jersey from 2 years ago. Brother does not tweet, but that's everybody at this stage. I feel like over the years in the LCS, people have become less and less out there, figures in a way. And I was wondering if that is one thing you guys want to kind of focus on and streaming or doing something to be able to reach the community.
Yeah.
Okay, I will say as a player. Oh, sorry, John.
No,
Wait,
go ahead, go ahead. You go first.
Okay,
Yeah, go for
I'll
it.
say as a player, like the culture around League esports and just kind of like any competition has become like really overwhelmingly negative. And so for pro players, it's actually really hard to put yourself out there, and that includes myself. Even though I say it's fun to interact with haters, it's fun if it's like one to one and you can have a conversation, but it's not fun when they're just like flooding your shit with like hate, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's only fun if it's like actually like a conversation. And so I think like because nowadays, even like the best teams in the world, like or like even like the best teams in NA, right? No one if you go to their posts, it's never like, wow, these guys are so good. It's always wow, the other team is so shit. And then if the best team loses, they're like, wow, these guys are shit too. So actually everyone is just shit. And we can't even like praise anyone. We're just
Yeah.
all bad. And then when Faker wins World, he's like, yeah, that guy's shit too. So like there's just no incentive of like, wow, this guy's actually good. And I feel like original League had a lot of that, where it was like, wow, like look at these outplays, like look at how good these players are. And now it's just like every outplay is someone else's fault. It's not an outplay. It's just the other guy's bad. I
Mhm.
don't know if you saw the highlight of was it Diablo's it was his Callista
Yeah.
and he got like an insane fight in the base, and there's just like half the comments are just like, look at this click, like he forgot to use barrier, like this guy, this is not even a highlight, he just sucks. Like what is wrong with these people, you know? And then if you're not able to have a dialogue with them, it's really exhausting to interact with them. But I think if you're able to actually converse with them, then it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've definitely bumped into people like when I was working tailgates at the LCS, like, like in the parking lot with the fans, like, they could just come up and be like, "Hey, you're Jonathan, right?" And then just ask a question. In that context, no matter how much of a hater they are, conversation's always enjoyable, always amicable, like always a good time. And even if they don't like support the org, they're still supporting the league, they care, they're engaged. But I feel like a lot of the folks online, they just like, they stumble upon something that they didn't even really organically look for, and then they're just like going to throw in their 2 cents of critique, and it's usually negative, to Lawrence's point. Like, I think it's really difficult for players to put themselves out there and expect to even have like a positive, like I think expecting for neutral is like the most optimistic that a lot of players could be. And it's like,
Mhm.
optimistically they might get like a 100 or 200 viewers if they do really well and are consistent, and that's assuming they're like streaming on top of like, scrimming for like 5 to like 8 hours a day most days a week. Like when we're in season, it's like, let's say we play on Saturday every week, right? Sunday would be your off day. You are scrimming Monday through Friday, and there's not really a ton of time off unless you're just going to queue up the stream on your day off for a little bit. And it's like it's difficult to consistently just take the extra time on those weekend nights when like you may want to play some solo queue and just kind of like practice some stuff for stage that you don't necessarily want out there in the world, right? So it's always like a huge catch 22 to ever click the stream on, and it's even harder when you add in the context that like the average league fan is just kind of a big like negative in general in terms of like their output and how they speak and how they interact. So it's
Mm.
tough.
All right. Let's see if we. I'm sure we're flooded with
Yeah, we have a
questions
lot of
at this
questions. I
point.
actually have the next one flagged. So the
Okay.
next one's a two-parter from Jonathon. Um, So, was the roster created fairly late? There are many rumors that y'all were one of the last to get the roster together, and were the coaches a part of the roster making process? If the coaches were, and if this is true, like late start, do you think that this possibly led into the rough start early and then conflicting ways and ideologies of the team not seeing eye to eye in games and reviews, and what can and will be done to remedy this? So, I'll probably give you like a three-part answer. So, yes, we were pretty like slow on the off season. Part of it was that I was brought in a little bit late and was like not in the most ideal setup, because usually how this works is like teams kind of like know how their split went. They've already done their exit interviews when their season ended, and then as you get towards off-season period, they all kind of like start asking each other like, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Who's moving who? Which players are going to be available?" And you start to like get your lay of the land, so that by the time you get to like mid to late October, you're getting close to like the time when you can start signing players. Everyone's got a pretty good idea of what's going on. Obviously, I got brought in decently late into that period, so I didn't have a ton of time, and I still needed to go and talk to all the current players and staff as well of Dig at the time to figure out like, should we keep anyone, should we not? Is there like, immediate players that want to leave no matter what? Like, that whole situation that you need to figure out. So from there, I kind of like had a bit of a lagging start, which made things tricky. And then also, I think just transparently, there's a lot of teams that are like the movers and shakers of the offseason who have like, more exciting teams like already built in the league that performed well in the previous season. So like people are going to wait for them to go through and figure stuff out and then kind of work their way backwards. And with Sentinels coming into the league, a lot of people were unsure like, are they going to try and like swing for the fences? Are they going to be like these super big like crazy spenders that are going to try and build this really strong team? Maybe I could get on a team there. And so there was just like a lot of just delays and slow and waiting, and it definitely like burned a hole in the time bank to a certain extent. And I think the only thing we were able to do relatively quickly was bring the coaches in. So I think the coaches were definitely part of the decisions, but obviously it's decisions within the context of like you don't really get to have like the greatest conversations in the offseason because it's usually like, hang on, let me get back to you, man, for like almost every player you talk to, and everything gets kind of crazy. So I think I was pretty surprised, like in a good way, with the group that we got, and I think I was even more surprised that like it all kind of panned out the way it did. Usually there's like a wrench that gets thrown into offseason that luckily I feel like we got to avoid, where someone who sounds like they're a yes turns into a no or something like that. So I think it was pretty decent. Um, and then I think as far as like the conflicting ways and ideologies of seeing the game, part of that I will say is like a kind of like a knock-on effect of like in the lock-in, because people were kind of trickling in. We never really had to like build the core way that we wanted to do things or like flesh that stuff out, because we actually very rarely got to play with the actual core group of the team because it took so long for everyone to get involved. So long answer short, I think the future is very much like we now have everyone in place, and so long as there's not like huge shakeups on the staff side, like it's much easier to like incrementally make changes and know what you're trying to build towards instead of like having to take the shotgun approach that we had to take this offseason.
I guess the only thing I can pretty much bounce off of, and this is mostly to eXyu, because you were there from the very start when all the visa nonsense shit was happening. Is there any like negative feelings or bad habits that get built up after, like, let's say week 5, once you finally get everyone in, but you're playing with like sub bot lane at 1 week, your coaching staff's not here the other, and so like even though it felt as though there was some hope off um, the lock-in stage, because there were some pretty good plays that we saw mostly from mid jungle, and like Photon had like a really good, I think it was his Kennen game. Like there were great moments, but I think because of how lock-in happened, did you have to unlearn or unseat certain feelings because of that?
Kinda, yeah. I think when we only had the top half of the roster, I think a lot of our game plans were just go top side and let bot be like its own thing.
Yeah.
I think bot was struggling. Um, and that kind of showed in our series against Lion. We just went top and killed Dokla, and our bot was down like 3k gold because I think they just had a hard time laning, and they were put in hard matchups. But yeah, when like obviously with the season progressing, like it became really apparent that bot lane is OP, and so going top is not a natural strategy. So
Yeah.
we had to flip into that, and then I think that's where like the ideology differences started, and then I think we just never really were able to fully agree on what is the most important thing in the game.
Mm-hmm. What, and this is going to be, once again, you don't have to answer this, or you can find a creative way to answering it, because I know the broadcast hit on this a lot, which is when we talked about the meta and how important it is to play enchanters. Well, also you guys have a support player that's like really prolific as an engage melee. Like, what is the push and pull of we should play to our strengths versus playing to the meta strengths that happen within the team?
I think we kind of struggled to find a balance. I mean, obviously everyone knows Ignar is a beast at engage. Like,
Yeah.
that's his whole thing. But I actually do think he was playing the enchanters quite well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think especially on stage, like the lack of direction we have as a team and the lack of unity, I think having him on engage kind of is a band-aid fix for that, because it's really easy to just say go 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 and everyone just go go go
Yeah.
instead of like playing a slow fight and like baiting cooldowns and all that stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean we ended up playing a lot of like I think we did well on like Lucianami, that type of stuff. Ash Seraphine, we played a lot of that, so we did lean towards enchanters a lot, but I think when shit hit the fan, we kind of did go towards the melees.
Yeah, I could definitely agree. I think a lot of the like tools and strengths of our team was like that very like engaged support, and then like bruiser fighter jungle, and just wait, once Ignar starts saying go go go, we all just kind of ship it. But like
Yeah.
when the meta turns out the way it does, it's a lot harder for your go 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 button to be like a Seraphine looking for R. Like that's usually you got to wait for like something to happen and then you throw it. So it kind of changes the dynamic, and we definitely had some games where like we would just default to that comfort of like melee engage supports. But I do think like, especially as the season progressed, we got like way more comfortable on like enchanters and ranged and figuring it out. But obviously, it was just once we hit mid game was where you really got to see the problems, and I think that was like a lot of what Lawrence was indicating. Like that's where the really like not seeing eye to eye started to kind of make us look like headless chickens sometimes.
That answered
Yeah.
it for me.
Cool. I'm gonna jump into some more questions because we've got a bit of a stockpile here.
Sure.
Do you guys get any leeway with picking champs that you feel would work, or are you strictly a by the book, if this is meta, we play it type of ordeal? And if is there some wiggle room, or if there is the wiggle room, uh, would this help with uncertainty? For example, saying I'm not the most comfortable with this meta champ. I'll throw this to you directly, Lawrence.
I think most teams kind of follow the same progression where you try to learn the game, you try to get on the same page in a very basic sense, and then you can expand from there. But I think as a team, we never got past the basic sense, so we didn't do any experimentation with picks.
Yeah.
But usually when you figure out how to play the game standard, then that's when you start like making changes to the rules. But we never figured out the baseline rules as a team, so we didn't get much chance to do that.
Yeah, I will say there's definitely a few like baked in non-meta champs that started like bubbling up throughout the season. Like I know FlyQuest has a bunch of pocket picks, and there's like individual players in the league that like have their champions. So like I know earlier in the year we would pull out like Kennen and Gwen and stuff like that, like more carry tops that weren't really getting played that much, and you know some other picks here and there that are a little off kilter. And I think generally the struggle is like I think on our team it's less of a like we're only playing things because it's meta, and it's more so like because of how fearless works. I think there's an element of like you actually get punished for not picking good champs in the first game, especially because then those champs are now up again. So like if you weren't willing to trade OPs or do something like that, and you end up on like second pick, that can actually make the draft harder or even more complicated and hard to predict. So I think because we were having a lot of like just struggles as a team in general, it became difficult to go down that well of like, oh well, if we can find a way to pick this, counter pick that we really like into this popular matchup, then we can do XYZ things. When like we weren't actually having the success in the game for the like that level of like depth to really even matter at a certain point.
Mm.
Cool. I will also hop into the next one because we've got some more eXyu targeted ones. So to eXyu, what learnings do you think you could learn from your time on DSG? DSG last year was very rough overall, but ended up kind of coming together at the end to retain the spot. What things do you think were beneficial from your time there, and how maybe could they be implemented in the summer season for Dig?
The first thought that comes to my head is probably not the one you want to hear. Because I think between when we were struggling and when we found success, there were some changes that happened.
Yeah. There was a little hell.
Like, I would say personally for me, I think between when we were struggling and when we finally found a bit of success in summer.
I think you were cutting out a little bit there.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, you're good now.
Oh, I cut out. Nice. But yeah, I think I started focusing a lot on fighting, and I think one of the big things that Ido helped me a lot with was just like learning the intricacies of a fight and understanding that like a gold lead isn't the same on everyone, and like the way you use it is more important, and like how you fight. So I think that was a big focus for me, and I think as a team, we strong. I think even on DSG, we had a lot of holes, and it even showed in relegation. But I think actually one of the things that I think is interesting about that DSG roster is like the power of narratives, because all we did was beat Dig twice and then take C9 to 5 games. So I don't actually think we were that strong as a team. True. But when we got in, everyone was like, "Wow, these guys are favorites. They're so good." But if you watch our relegation matches, we weren't heavy favorites. Like we struggled against Estral until there was a 4-hour pause and Summit got banned.
Yep.
And then it became really free. Like I think we were going to win anyways, but we did. And then in our finals against Luminosity, we were down in the early game in most games. I mean, I had a bad game too. I think they threw an almost unlosable game by getting garnered hard by both their carries when they were up like 5 or 6K. And I think we came back in a game that was like very, very hard. So I don't think we were the roster that people say we were, but I think having carries that you can reliably you can just rely on, I think is really important. I think it made a much more stable player when I looked at my carries and I was like, wow, these guys, I just need to get them there and they will carry me. And then, yeah, I think as a team, we just became more stable. But we weren't a dominant team or like anything outstanding.
I'll piggyback and say that at least from the DSG standpoint, even when things weren't looking good, at least from outside looking in, you can respond to it. It felt like the vibes of the team was good, and it felt like the atmosphere was pretty good. And also, I think it was the same, at least when you were with Fear as well in tier 2. My question is, what are the takeaways from those teams to have keep a good vibes while, well, Fear, you guys were actually successful on that one, but like keep a good vibe while also being in an environment where you are losing a lot in scrims?
Fear was like the biggest example to me of like how I think teams should be led. Like I would say that me and Blaze Olive were definitely the leaders of that team.
Mhm.
And I think like Philip and Instinct were very willing to like kind of listen and be a part of that, and Winsome as well. They were all like down to let me and Blaze Olive lead. I think I would say we did a pretty good job leading that team. And then coming into LCS, I think on the DSG roster, I wasn't. There's like a lot of veteran presence on the team,
Yeah.
and so I kind of wanted to come in and like learn. Wasn't properly set as a team for what I expect of a team dynamic. And I mean, in hindsight, I think I put too much pressure on the leaders to set the tone, given the personalities that they were working with.
And this is for Dig or for DSG?
This is for DSG.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I was like very harsh on like the veterans for the culture that they were creating, but I think with the personalities that we had, it was very difficult to create the culture that I wanted. And
Yeah.
then I think when we made changes, that was when I was able to see like, oh, actually, the leadership capabilities are there. You just have to be willing to put in that effort with it. I think that's kind of what I meant in the interview when I said to be a good team, you need to like each other or you need to like respect each other. I think we weren't there in spring, you know, like Scary Jerry, like, you know, he's a homie. I like him a lot. We didn't all together.
Oh, now you're just cutting out.
Yeah, your mic's
Oh.
really choppy. You might have to put the sensitivity up.
Ah, shit. Okay. Wait,
You're
hello,
getting in
hello,
the
hello.
you're getting in the groove of it too.
No, that's good. Maybe I speak too much and I was gonna leak some crazy shit. But yeah, just I think DSG was a roster that like we did enjoy each other's presence outside of game, and I think that's really important even when you're losing. And I think our roster right now is struggling to find that in certain aspects.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say like to piggyback off the current vibes. I think obviously the team is in a a real sad spot in terms of just like we lost a lot of games, season's over, that kind of stuff. But I
Yeah.
think like for a good chunk of this season, we were very like decently social outside of scrims. Like we played a lot of board games after practice. That was like our kind of like pillar of our team culture, was just every day. The second scrims end, we finished the last review. Everyone's just like, Avalon? We gonna play Avalon? And we would just play a couple games of Avalon, maybe some coup, basically like deception games was like the big one. We would just have a good time. And then after games on the weekend, I know FBI is a big UFC guy, so some of the guys would get together and watch UFC at the house and order food and that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
then there's even times where like we would go to Palafox's house and just like, grab a bunch of food and watch like movies, do whatever, just yap. So like I do think our team vibe has been pretty decent most of the year, and it's just very much like the in-game stuff when it truly gets bad does very much like bleed over into the like personality element of like, okay, you spent like 8 hours of your day having like a not super productive kind of bad time with like as far as results are concerned in scrims, and now you're gonna be like, do you want to keep hanging out with those people? And it's kind of like a lot of people are very quick to be like, I kind of want to just disconnect and go home for a little bit and do my own thing and just like recharge,
Hmm.
which obviously is fine, but it's not necessarily like as optimistic or like good for the team environment as like someone brute force being like, we're going to go get boba, we're going to go for a walk, we're going to go like do something together. So like I think for us it was very like a couple of people here and there would go, like someone would want to go to the store nearby our house, or like someone would want to just go for a walk, and so like individual like pairs or groups or that kind of thing would go around, but it was never like all 8 of us just like going on a big march around town or anything like that.
All right.
Yeah.
So a bit of a random curveball, very unrelated to all of this stuff, but someone asked if we have any thoughts on the Jinxie tournament that's happening. So I don't know how much you guys have even been paying attention to it, but it basically happened today, broke 1 billion records, was all over Twitter, and I think it's probably over by now, which is crazy
Yeah.
to
I
think
think it's
about.
over.
I mean, it's good for the esports scene for sure.
Yeah.
Just good to get more eyes on League of Legends and more people trying it out. So
I
It's
love.
Really
good.
good.
I think the timing is low key perfect now that there's WASD controls because the average like player trying to play League was like, I have to right click to move. What the hell? And just
Yeah.
that kind of shut them off of it real quick. But I think WASD like now is the time to start getting people into it, and this is like one of the cool ways for people to organically kind of get like shown the game and get into it with their friends.
It's the perfect time, and I think it's just another example of like, yeah, sure, it's a bunch of creators coming together, so the viewership is going to be amazing for that one. But it does show that like, at the end of the day, people care about personalities. They care about people that they follow. So like, for instance, some of my friends were in that tournament, so I just watched it from their POV. So I think it's really cool, and at least people are seeing League as a way to kind of like bring their communities together. Um, some of my favorite content growing up and watching League before esports stuff was literally just people playing as fives or people duoing. So I think more content like that should probably just be coming out. Obviously, that would mean that we'd have to have consistent duo queue, which is terrorizing the ladder. That's another discussion altogether. But I think it's definitely needed for good content. But I enjoyed it. Also, just watching the new player experience from a lot of people is actually the most insane shit. Like, yeah,
Marlon.
not only, yeah, there's a lot of people actually because there's multiple tournaments that are happening around this week that are just around new players, people who are like learning League, and I'm like, oh, this is painful. Like, good luck, brother. You are learning how to play against Garen and Darius or Warwick or something just like that is very pub stompy. So
Yeah, I think it's been really sweet just to see like the amount of people engaging with the game, even if a lot of them are like, only here for a short time. I think just like seeing what the game's all about and being like, oh, that could be fun to play with my friends is like that's enough to get the ball rolling. So I do hope it
yeah,
turns into like more people getting into things and even like these influencers who are dabbling into it, them getting maybe interested in like what's like the pro version of this game like, and then all of a sudden we can then have them like supporting teams and getting involved and like really kind of getting people watching the league in like higher numbers, which I think is just where everyone wants to be. So I think it's like a very good step to like a multi-step process to kind of growing this space again.
yeah, agreed.
Dope. Let me go dig the next question up. There's a lot of non-questions. So there's one question about Jin in particular. So I don't want to go too deep into this because it's very much just like a meta question. But many teams currently pick Jin across each region, and some are not having the best win rate with the champion. Do you feel that there is any champ that can kind of replace Jin in the meta, for example, like a Samira, Quinn, Twitch, or do you feel Jin is irreplaceable and needs to be picked? I will say I'm a staunch Jin defender. I think this champ's good, and I think if you are good at the champion, it's even better.
Yeah, I also think those three champions that you listed are like
Completely unrelated to what
complete
Jin does. Yeah, agreed.
impossible to
Hmm.
replicate what Jin does. So, um,
Yeah, Jin just wins lane.
but yeah,
It's pretty
Jin
good.
is strong.
He wins lane. He's got pick. He's got CC. He just does a bunch of cool stuff that's like extremely unique and not really done by other champs in the game.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I hate is people clump all drafts to a champion. Like for instance, I'll look at a Jin draft where he's going up against like fucking Scion, something like that, and you're like, oh, you have very limited damage, and this Jin is not set up to succeed. Like maybe if you had like Rumblers, there are some comps that I love Jin in, and I think Jin works perfectly in those comps. And people will look at those comps and say, ugh, there's a Jin in my screen. That's awful. You're lumping that in with another, in my perspective, bad draft with a Jin. And I think people do that a lot, where they look at a champion, think it's just blanketed bad, or look at a win rate and said it's blanketed bad instead of looking at the purpose for that win rate. Like, I was like, oh, like thinking about is this draft good, or are all the bad teams playing this pick specifically? Like, it always, I hate people who look at stats specifically to point out what if a champion is looking good or bad. Um, and also, I do not like it when people lump it together because they'll look at, I forget who is playing it a lot and doing extremely well in LCK and be like, oh, actually, he's the only one allowed to play Jin. It's like, oh, so you just want Jin to be played correctly? Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, we're all aligned then. We're all aligned. That's it. That's my rant.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I'm sure Lawrence is too. Like I think we won one of our stage games with Jin against tanks, and it was just like the comp had plenty of damage. It worked. It made sense. The Jin locked stuff down and was able to like play range to not get dove. And then we were able
Yeah.
to like clean up the fights because Jin just moves really fast when he's in late game. So like he can clean up fights pretty well. So like I think we've seen our fair share of good Jin drafts to be Jin defenders at the very least.
Yeah.
So a question for Raz. In shifting to positivity, is this something that can be changed on the broadcast, or do you think this is an overall culture around league esports that needs to be fixed?
It starts with about everyone. So like that's a good challenge because I thought about this quite a bit. Because at least my view of how we handle things in the broadcast is we'll try and find a reason for you to be a fan of every team. Like there has to be some player or a way a team is playing or some aspect of the team itself that is like really enjoyable for you to want to be a fan of them, right? And then when the season continues and let's say there's either like Shopify or a Dig or someone that's like not performing well, there is still going to be a shining light. This is the same thing when I was in the LPL and we had certain teams like LGD or Newbie or something that were like, yeah, they were struggling. But in those games, you saw something that was really good, like one player having standout performances that you can like kind of lift up and you can talk about that and give people a reason to care about that. I do think that you can continue to do that, that you have to still be authentic and talking about in a productive way what a team or player could do better. And of course, that is a responsibility of being right when you're saying that. You do all that, but I think there is truly a lot of negativity, not just in League, but also just, dude, I go on Twitter, there's a shit ton. I'm a big NBA fan. There's the same situation we have in the LCS with the NBA with like constant negativity around every subject matter. With Twitch, constant negativity on every subject matter with like literal clipping accounts. So it is difficult. And I think the way I handle it is by just being as much of a force for that level of positivity. Or of course when people think positivity, they don't think authenticity. Is like you can be positive and still be authentic to what you believe in. Like you can still call a spade but still hit a point positively. So yeah, if you're going to call something bad, you might want to give a strong solid reasoning. And also yeah, this goes back to the last topic we talked about, because this is the idea of like, what is bad? What is good? People say that when they don't want to go into the depths of what they're criticizing because they don't either have the game knowledge or understanding or the eloquency to be able to discuss what they're seeing. It's just like, if you think something, and also when you're saying something is bad, what are you comparing it to? Are you comparing it to the LPL teams, the best LPL teams, the best LCK teams? Or are you comparing it to just the teams in the region? Because like, I think that also gets really muddy of what you are calling good or bad. I just want to know what you are actually talking about. So to the main point, try and be a force of positivity and being honest with what you're saying, and not just, I think, being a prisoner of the negative mindset. Anything you see on the timeline can really fuck with you. That is true. And I think if you handle things in a positive way and interact with people in a positive way, you will get a positive response like 9 times out of 10. Firmly believe that.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in here for one last little note. Like, I think very much like comparison is the thief of joy for most sports in general, which is like, if you have the two like bottom teams and like someone does something cool, but it's because the other team messed up, it's so easy to be like, oh, if this was like, the best team in the league, they wouldn't have made that mistake and you would have never got that opportunity. And it's like, sure, that might be true, but like for this moment right here, right now, between these two teams we're watching, this thing happened and it was cool. Let's like have fun and like accept that it was cool to let ourselves smile a little bit, like we don't have to be all buttoned up and assume that like every mistake that's capitalized on is like automatically like not really a win.
Actually, this is a perfect example. I know we were talking about the Jinxie thing and how, it was completely off topic, but there was a clip, I think it was like Burnt Peanut, like getting a solo kill, and people were like, oh, what the hell? They're celebrating the fact that he got his first solo kill like in League. And the same thing happened with Jinxie. And people were like, his clicks are pretty damn good. Like that's kind of, it's not in a suspicious way or whatever, but people were like, hey, he looks pretty good. Did he play in another MOBA? And you look underneath that comment section, is like, well, actually, his clicks are pretty bad. I was like, he's a fucking new player. He's a fucking new player. What are we talking about? What are we talking about? The best way to make the negative Nancys look bad is literally just flinging it right back at them. Like when you fling their own statements back at them, it looks clowny. It really does. So yeah, it happens. It's nonstop. I think it comes with anonymity a lot at times. But yes, it's in every space. That's why whenever I see more doomerism on the topic, not just of like LCS, but of Dignitas or of the league or of League of Legends in general, I'm like, dude, there's doomerism in every scene, nonstop at all times. It for some people, it's a little bit, for clicks. That happens. For other people, it's because they just see that negativity and it does resonate in a way. So you just have to fight back on that when you can.
Yeah, 100%. All right, I will say jumping into the next question. So this is kind of going back to eXyu's point on toxicity. So there's a lot of folks in the Discord who, are kind of a little toxic at times when they're trying to cheer for the team and watching us lose and stuff like that, and it can be frustrating. So what can like the fans of the teams that are struggling do to try and like stay positive about the team, even if there aren't necessarily like the results to kind of back it up?
It's pretty hard. I'll be honest. I feel like most of the hate,
Yeah.
not hate, most of the frustration is deserved. And I think with the lack of content that all of us Dig players put out and Dig as an org, yeah, there's not that much to cheer for. I'll be honest. Like maybe if I was streaming every day and like, I had like genuine interactions with you guys or like stuff like that, I think there would be a reason to keep on supporting. But I mean, that's why we're pretty grateful to have the Dig fans. It's like we haven't really given you guys a reason to be fans, but you guys still choose to be fans. So, for that, we're really grateful. And I think on our side, we should try to do a better job, either results wise or just interacting. Because, yeah, I think what we provide right now isn't deserving of fans. That's how I feel.
Yeah, and I will say on the content side too, like I think a lot of LCS teams this year in general have like pulled back on the content just because like I don't think anyone's truly found like the winning formula where like you can make this consistently, it doesn't cost a ton of resources and actually gets engaged with. Like I think a lot of teams are making like the normal stuff they've tended to make and like the fans just aren't really watching much of it, and it's one of those things where like unless your team is like being hate watched, like I know a lot of the Lion like comms videos and behind the scenes, everyone is like tuning in to see like is this the week it all goes wrong, like is this the week we can hate watch and finally watch it all pan out? But like outside of those kinds of content pieces, like I really genuinely think like, if we were to put like a comms video out of us losing a game, I don't think the fans are going to be like, thank goodness this is out because I can now like cheer with full enthusiasm. Like they're going to be like, okay, but can you win the game? And like that's just going to
Yeah.
perpetuate the negativity, right? So it's very difficult to be like, what could we put out to help reverse the narrative? At a certain point, like it just needs to come from like the perspective of the fan. Like as a fan, you want to see your team win. So like you just kind of have to put the energy out there that you would hope to read if you were in the player's shoes of like just completely relentless positivity in the hopes that it someday finds them or something. Like I think that's kind of the boat you have to be in. But I know like most sports fans, regardless of what sport we're talking about, are like, oh, my team that I love is losing. I'm going to be mad about it because like I get happy when they win and I get sad when they lose. Like I'm functionally part of the team. So like if they're losing, you're gonna feel sad. Like that's totally normal. And it's just you have to do what you can to put the energy back out there just because like the gap between you and the pro player in terms of like visibility is so much narrower than like an NHL player or an NBA player where like you could scream into the void for hours and they would never be able to even like see a fraction of it.
I have a statement, then I'll turn into a question to you guys, actually. The statement is mostly just responding to the idea of like, hey, I'm a fan of the Raptors, and the Raptors were actually doing pretty well this year. But in the past, they've been dog shit. And I think, and also, I've been a fan of like Invictus Gaming when they were dog shit prior to, bringing back Rookie and the Shy. Like, and of course, now they have a different top lane. But I'm just saying, like, it's fine. It's easy to be a fan of a team, and well, easy. It is hard to be a fan of a team that is not doing well. That is true, and I think it does come to that cat's fucking beautiful.
It's a good cat.
It is. It does come to like the thing of like, hey, I will always tweet or like be frustrated if my team is playing like shit. But that doesn't mean I'm not a fan of a team. So it's like pushing back on that negativity. It really does depend on what type of negativity is because like you can have that's like a good conversation if you don't agree with that person, but oftentimes like if you do agree with them that the team isn't playing bad, that the team isn't playing well, that's fine. Like that's what comes with being a fan ultimately. Like it comes with being a fan and being able to see your team play like shit and just being like, yeah, fucking blows. My bot lane got boomed again. And there's someone in the chat right now that's exactly a fan of a team that plays like shit a lot of the times, and you just understand it. You know what it's like. You go with the flow of it, and I don't think you need to push back on that. That being said, I think there is an aspect of what you said prior, eXyu, that resonated, which is like, if you can't be positive based off of the gameplay, you still can be positive based off of like a personality. And I think content is a big thing that, like, I remember Dignitas back in season 3 and before that, they were like an average team. They were a good team, top 3 or 4th, maybe 5th, depending on if another team had like a surge like Orbit or something. But they were still like a meme team, a team that streamed constantly, or there was content around it. And content has changed. I was wondering if you guys could, what was like a content plan or idea that you guys had that made sense? Because I personally loved some of the FlyQuest content that was more around shorts than long form content. Because you're right, like comms content, that shit can blow unless if there's something substantive, which is the lion stuff. Which is like, oh, teammates are literally just fucking borderline fist fighting in comms. I'm always there for that. But what kind of content plan do you guys think would work for your team to get your personalities out there? Because the worst thing that can happen for a team that's losing is retreating into itself. Because then, yeah, then we don't know you, and that can get worse.
Yeah, I think there was one piece we actually did recently when so we brought on Kyler, who actually used to be at FlyQuest, who made some of those short form things that you guys liked.
True.
So we actually
Love that
did a
brother.
similar one to what I think he did at FlyQuest, which was like, show a logo with all of the like names and identifying parts taken out. So it's just like the baseline logo, no text. And it's like, what's the name of this team in like the MLB? And like most esports players don't actually watch, especially the MLB. And so like, it's just a big meme of like, those are the ball guys, and it's just you put in like
Yeah.
big typeface like ball guys, and it's just it's a good fun time, and it went pretty well, got a lot of traction on Instagram reels and stuff like that. So I think like those kinds of like fun, like more just like letting the players have a good time and like show their personas outside of the context of the game is like a good way to just like introduce the player personalities. I think like podcasts and like kind of stuff like this where it's more long form is fun, but it's like extremely hard to access and digest for the average fan, which I think if you can bring them in with the shorts, and then like maybe you can be like, oh, I wonder what this player thinks about like the actual game, or what's going on in the league, or maybe the LCK or LPL or something like that. But it's a tricky one. Lawrence, do you have any thoughts on the kinds of content you
On
like to put out
content?
there?
I mean, I always like more authentic content. I think like the thing you're talking about with like the guessing teams thing, I think it's cute, but it's not original, Like,
Yeah.
and I think if you don't already like, who was it? It was Ignar, and who did it? Was it Ignar and Christian?
It was Ignorant Christian, and then we did one with the coaches, which was extra funny because they're Australian and European, so they definitely don't know them.
Yeah, I just feel like if you don't already like the people doing it, that's not going to make you like them.
Yeah.
Like I think you need content that shows like their actual personality, and I think I don't really know what the best way to do that would be. I think it's streaming,
Yeah.
but the players need to be willing to stream, and I think
Also a
they need
crowded
to be willing to
marketplace
put
too.
themselves out there. Yeah, it is a crowded marketplace, but I think like,
You just got to do it to do it.
yeah, I don't
And
know. I think street like interviews on
Yeah.
stage and stuff like that. That's a good way. I think like when I first did pros for the first time, I know a lot of people were like, "Whoa, this guy's like good at talking." Like I like this guy.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
ways to put yourself out there, I guess, and like be yourself.
I do think a lot of it's like catered to people's personalities, because I do think when you said John, when you mentioned like FBI bringing people over to watch a UFC fight, I'm like, oh, I didn't know anything about that from FBI.
Yeah,
Like
because that
that'd
guy
be
doesn't
cool.
tweet though, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true. But it's like I would want to know his opinions on just fighters, or his like love for fighting game, just like UFC or anything like that, MMA. Because like for instance, I mean, Contracts obviously has been in the league for a fucking long time, but he's the anime guy, because like he
Yeah.
just, or One Piece specifically, but like that's just the thing there. That's like something about yourself that's outside of the game that people didn't know about you, that is now what you're willing to put out. That is like, or the stupidest thing that I always, it's been in the game forever, or been in the content sphere forever, is like one-on-ones, which is like, oh, that is very unoriginal and uncreative, but it's just two people shit talking and bantering. Like at least in LCS over the last couple of years, we don't do one-on-ones like at least this year, but in the past, like that's how we got the most personality from a lot of people. It's like thinking about, oh, what champion should I play versus him? And then like, it's just what you guys would say in scrims or in a more comfortable environment coming out to an actual content piece in terms of um, like shit talking and what champion would you want to do or strategy or stuff like that. Just whatever it is that showcases an authentic self that people usually don't see. I think that's what it is that I would love to see personally.
Yeah, and I think there's like some definite like nuggets of gold within the league of like players with hobbies and interests that you would never expect. Like for example, Ignar is super into like drifting and like just like high level cars and stuff like that. Like when we were in
That's fucking insane.
yeah, so like when we learned this was when we were on NRG and we were like seeing him watching a bunch of drifting videos. We're like, "Oh, are you like do you like watching cars?" He's like, "Yeah, I also like to drive and like do this kind of stuff with my friends in Korea." And we're like, what, you also are driving the car when this happens? Like, and so when we went to Korea for our boot camp in 2023, like he literally like flew back and then like went home and then drove his car from home to where we were boot camping so that he could drive us around town. And like the front seat was fully replaced with like a racing seat and like the removable like racing steering wheel, and he would wear like driving gloves and stuff when he drove, and you could tell
Yeah.
the second he turned his car on, like that's not a stock engine, like this guy's done some stuff to this car.
Yeah.
So like I think things like that, like breaking the containment of like behind the scenes and like becoming things that get talked about, like that, then a producer hears that on the LCS, they then dig into it, they then ask him questions, like that can become a thing. Like I think that is like the best way to do things, that it requires like a good relationship between like team management and players and like the league and the productions to like give that information and like let them kind of run with it, as well as like doing stuff on our end. Obviously I can't just get a drifting car and put Ignar in it and
Yeah.
then film him, like that was a little trickier to do, but I think there's like plenty of ways with like plenty of players in the league to do something cool. I will say one more. So back to the questions. Um, Someone asked, do you think that the way the broadcast talks about teams affects the player's mental if they don't agree with the sentiment? Last year, for example, Palafox was very outspoken about disliking some of the ways the casters talked about him. So I know this one's a famous one, and I know we kind of touched on it a little bit before, but I think this is like a very like Lawrence question. Has this ever happened where like the way the broadcast talks about you in particular is like something that you kind of like take personal like gripes with or anything like that?
A little bit. I mean, it's never personal, but sometimes it pisses me off. But like for example, on what is that thing called? The dive? Is that the weekly one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember I was watching one time, and then Azael said that I was the worst jungler in the league by far, and I was just thinking like, like the way I played that week, yeah, you know what? Like he's right, but so it's like kind of mad, but it wasn't like it's not personal against him. Like he's doing his job and he's analyzing the game. But I think where it does become unfair is when I feel like I do have good games. I feel like the return isn't the same, because I felt like I did have good games against like Lion and C9 and that type of stuff, and like there was no justification for that. It was just like, oh, he's still bad. And I was just like, all right, well, whatever. But we went 8th anyway, so maybe I am still bad. Like
Mhm.
I feel like for me to be mad about it, I need to prove him wrong, and we didn't do that. So there's no reason for me to be mad about it.
Yeah. I am not surprised because like that's just the nature of the business. Like you're right. In terms of we are going to be very clear, and especially the community, and I would say people would want you to be critical of the players and of the team specifically. So like there'd be a lot of times where I come in and I'm like, I think DSG, or actually this time around I said Dignitas would not be the worst team, but I was super critical of DSG. I was giga critical of DSG. I was like, by far they're still the worst team in the league, even though like literally last split they were in the upper bracket, right? And that will literally be tied to players and their personal careers. Like I was like, I literally did this in split one, and you still, for whatever reason, have chosen to say that my team is still dog shit. Like, why do you think that? It's frustrating, I'm sure. And I don't know how else to say it other than either you just have to tune it out, or if you hear something that is just truly inaccurate, to call it out. Because personally, I didn't take offense to Palafox coming out when he was on Shopify and like calling out casters. I wanted him to be more specific on what he thought was bad. That's my thing. Like, I think you should always call out what you feel like is a bad narrative or a bad fact, but I need you to come out with substance, because then we can change and get better at that. Like, obviously, you wouldn't want the players to point out something unfactual, because then that shows that you didn't do your due diligence. It was one of those moments at the time. It was like, I remember being in the meeting room after the Palafox statement. I was like, well, that shit ain't about me. I'm not casting. That's not about me. But number two, I was like, is what he said even what happened? Like, because if there's a no, then there's not much we can do about that. And I felt, and if it's a yes, then like we can challenge it. Personally, at that time, I was like, I didn't recall it. I think what the conclusion was that there was like a graphic that they wanted to put out, and it was a bad execution of a graphic, was probably the conclusion that they had in that meeting, which I think is a good way of approaching it. But yeah, that I think people should be more willing to call shit out. I remember looking on Twitter, and there was people like Vagar V2 or whoever that would literally just clip out a solid 30 seconds from like an LEC caster, an LCS caster, or whatever, and they would be like, "This is why I disagree with your take analytically." It's like, you just said this guy had a lead, but he just based on this timer. I'm like, I fucking love this bit. You pray you never know. You're never gonna be that one person that gets called out and be the point of a clip, but I love it when it happens. So I think it's good. I personally think it's good.
Yeah, I will say, to like cap this off, the biggest like struggle of why this happens all the time too is like casters and analyst desk members and kind of like the public at large can only really see what happens on the
Yeah.
stage games, whereas like
Yeah.
every team is like obviously scrimming a ton of games during the week, and then they're talking to pros on other teams and getting kind of told like through a game of telephone that gets progressively like less reliable the more layers you go, like how the other team's scrims are going against other teams in the league. So like there was definitely times in the season where I was like, damn, TL, Lion, C9, and like two other teams are winning all their games in scrims and never losing them. That's probably mathematically possible, I think. Like, so you
Yeah.
kind of like can't always rely on it, but I do think like even from our own perspective, like there were some weeks of scrims in particular, like we actually had a very good week of scrims and we're like very confident going into the game, but then like, you know, something went really horribly wrong, or like we had a really good game one or two, but like some of the other games were like throws or something, and like the result doesn't change in the win category, and so the narrative kind of just stays stagnant, even though like there was clear progress behind the scenes, at least from our perspective that week.
Yeah, 100%. And the same goes with like the fans as well, because I will say, we are all in the entertainment business, so I know that like if I have a shit segment, I'm gonna go on Twitter or on Reddit and I'll be like, people did not like it, making it very clear to me. Or when I was LPL like caster at the time, and I was just saying that RNG is gonna shit on Fnatic, and guess what would happen? The European fan base was just down, like fucking despise me, and I recognize that's the case. So I think there will always be a situation where like someone's opinions are gonna piss you off, and you need to just like disconnect. If it's the wrong opinion, if it's something that you can easily disprove, then you should definitely get out there and do it. The worst feeling, though, that's another topic entirely, is like whether you feel like you can, if you know the audience is against you. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna keep using Palafox as an example, because Palafox definitely got bad audience like the audience did not like his like response during that take that he had. But I feel like there's probably a world out there where it's like, I do feel like I've been wronged, and I have good grievances here, and I should come out and say it. And if you come out and say it versus somebody who's very popular, then it's like, is that worth the trouble? Is that worth, like, I've just been like, somebody else who's more popular than I am is probably going to just usurp me. It's like someone else. So basically, if you're calling out LS and all his LS fanboys can come at you, even if you feel like you had good grounds to do so. So these are just random examples, but I think it sometimes can be very difficult. But I still do think that if you feel like a narrative is incorrect, to come out and call it out. But be aware of like using specifics. Be good.
Cool. Yeah, I'll hop into the next question because we do have another one for eXyu specifically. So from Jonathon, I know the stated goals from the org are to try and finish top 6. Question 1, what are your goals for the team? And 2, what do you think about the stated goals of a team, or do you not really care about what's said publicly from the org perspective if you're playing on it, as long as like you and your teammates are on the same page?
My goals for the team were to try to go to an international, and I think we showed glimmers of like we can keep up with these guys, but our lack of improvement throughout the year hasn't compete for that.
I think
So we'll
you're cutting
continue
out
to look
again.
at that. Oh, hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, I don't know what's doing that,
Fuck
but I
now.
can hear you. It is what it is.
Sounds better now.
All right. Wait, what did you hear?
Bits and pieces.
I'll just say it again. I mean, my initial goal with the roster was to compete for an international event, and then I think we showed glimpses of hope when we took TL to 3 games or took C9 or like all these teams. But I think our lack of improvement throughout the split in the year as a whole kind of we aren't able to, and it's something that we need to work on going forward if achieve that goal. But I think the second question, I think all my teammates agree with the goal that I have. So our goal is not the same as the publicly stated goal of Dig,
Yeah.
which is like a top 6. I think no player goes into the season saying, I really hope I can top 6 this season. I think that would be like a really pitiful goal. But maybe necessary for us. Maybe we our sights a little shorter, and I think as a roster we genuinely believed we could be good, and we just failed to do that. So yeah, we'll just need to reassess our goals and reassess how we're improving and practicing throughout the split.
Yeah, and I'll add on to this one because I think this is like a similar thing to what happened on NRG, obviously with very different results, but like from like a process perspective, this is what we did, which was like internally we would set goals of like, hey, here's how much money we spent on the players compared to like what other teams are doing. Let's set like a reasonable expectation based on that. And then like that was completely like, disconnected from like the player goals, right? Like if the players came together, scrimmed, played a couple matches and were like, hey guys, I think we're pretty good. We should do like really, really well and like actually fight for like a top 4 spot in playoffs or something, then like that doesn't change the goal I'm pitching to management based on like our budgeting and kind of process and setup, right? It's very much like the people in the rooms, like the players, the coaches, and all the folks that are part of it every day. Those are the people who are like setting the goals for themselves in their own group, and like they're only accountable to each other. So like that actually becomes like a much better kind of situation.
Okay. I guess my question, I have a question on this one. It's like more on a management's perspective, because I think the players will always have a goal, and it would be crazy to not have a goal to go internationally when you are a player. But from a coaching staff or a general manager, what is your goal, especially coming into Dignitas, initially, um, in terms of like roster building?
Yeah,
Like
my
Mhm.
goal for most teams in general that I join is like I want to be able to like I'm not going to be able to get it right first. Like I think if you look at the first version of CLG when I first joined back in like the end of 2021, I think that roster was like us taking a lot of bets on a lot of different folks at the same time and being like we hope at least some of these hit, and also we have academy as like secondary opportunities. Obviously with the current LCS, you don't really have like, the a system necessarily to like grab 10 players and then hope that you can like find a combination between them that works out.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to take not like more sure bets, but you need to take much more educated guesses and bets. And my process is like I want to build a team that is competitive long term, but to do that you kind of have to like suss out the pieces and like kind of build the ship at sea to a certain extent. So like over time, whether it's with coaches, players, even just like how you're running practice, the structure, your office or house or whatever setup you might have, that stuff as you go, you need to kind of triage what's working, what's not working, make adjustments until eventually you start to find that recipe for success.
Yeah.
Obviously with CLG we didn't have to make too many changes. It was, like an initial roster move in top lane, we got to kind of see the spark happen a little bit, and then with like a firepower upgrade in bot lane that kind of got us over the finish line and allowed us to be like much better. But I think obviously you have to start with like small incremental changes of even just like the structure that we have too, like to find ways to get success over time. So from like a team building perspective, that's very much the strat. And yeah, to Jonathon's points in the chat, like there's a reason like we're working with conviction and trying to like get more access into the tier 2 space, because right now like even if we were to try and operate or run something in tier 2, we can't play in the promotion tournament, which is like the main like incentive in the circuit. So any team like we would actually be disadvantaged in attracting good players in tier 2 because they wouldn't want to play on a team where they then couldn't have a chance at promoting if they started playing well. So it's one of those like, you can't really win either way type situations.
Yeah, how would you see scouting be done now? Because like in eXyu's case, you came through C9 amateur, if I'm correct, right? To be initially scouted for LCS. Like
Yeah,
how
my path was
Mhm.
kind of weird because I was supposed to go to
Yeah.
scouting grounds, and then I got kind of screwed out of scouting grounds.
Oh, I remember
Uh,
that. Oh,
Yeah.
I was
So that was
okay. I
my
remember.
path. And then yeah, I did the C9 amateur thing. Then I did like a random trial for Dig Academy, and it all took off from there.
Hmm.
But I think now it's pretty hard to go pro. I think even when you stand out in tier 2, I think a lot of the fundamentals you're learning in tier 1.
Oh, now it's just
I
not
Okay.
think
picking
you
you up
need.
at all. I think you might need to put
Yeah.
you might need to put your
I
gain
actually
up a little
think
bit.
I think if literally if you're louder or announcing more, you're probably
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait. What
clear.
if I'll move my mic sensitivity down, and then maybe.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
the
that should do it.
activation that's getting you.
Okay. Okay. Wait. What did you hear? What was the last thing I said?
Process of learning in tier 2.
Oh yeah, I just think in tier 2 it's very easy to, because there's like a lot of it's really top heavy in tier 2. I guess the LCS is also like that, but like in tier 2 there's some really bad teams and there's some really solid teams, and I think when you scrim mostly worse teams, it's hard to pick up good habits unless you're really disciplined as a team. And I think a lot of tier 2 coaches aren't actually that useful. So
Mhm.
like you need to be very disciplined as a player on your own improvement. Otherwise, it's really hard for you to stand out enough to actually succeed in tier 1.
And for John, because you mentioned like it's hard to get surefire. Because with Academy, because I worked with you in Academy, it's very easy. You're literally just across, uh, you know, a space to
Yeah.
walk over to Academy and see what we are doing and what we're working on and how people work in a more personal situation, how they deal with feedback. How do you view scouting in tier 2 now when everything is like remote?
Yeah, it's extremely nebulous. I think like it's kind of up to you to do what you can to scout, but there's now like this big like margin for error that's just going to exist, right? Like there's a lot of tier 2 teams that are just, a bunch of people playing from home that don't have like any real structure outside of like, hey, we scrim every now and again when our schedules permit because a lot of us have like a part-time job or a thing that we're doing. There's some teams where they are like supported by a collegiate program and like kind of almost like moved kind of laterally into the NACL through like a team owns a slot, they like work with a team to pull them in. So like Citadel's kind of like that where it's kind of like the old Miz players. So it's like depending on the team, there's kind of like some weirdness there. But some of them, because of that, do get to play in person with staff and support and all that kind of stuff. And then you have to then compare that to like the teams that are like fighting to win and do everything but like are remote but have like what is perceived to be like stronger individual talent. And so there's like all these potential like blind spots, right, where there's like the full remote team. How would any of those players do if you were to bring them in person? For the team that's in collegiate, how different would they look if they didn't have the advantage of being in person? Like how much is that like propping up their overall team play versus like a team that might not have that benefit? Or maybe their time that they're able to put into it's different. So it's one of those things where like you're a little more blinded because the playing field is extremely like irregular and not level. And so
Yeah.
I think like finding like points of access through affiliation or just like strong relationships with like coaches for teams, players on the teams, like folks who pay attention to the space well, to just to get as many like individual points of information to compare against each other so that you're not leaving like a huge blind spot on a player as best you can at least.
What is that affiliation like? Because I would say the biggest critique right now is in Europe, they have a flourishing tier 2 system, so they don't really require it. But in LCK and LPL, they do have like academy or challenger teams, so it makes it a lot easier. But at least and once again, you weren't a part of this decision making, but when we moved away from academy and it was not based in California anymore, I guess the perception was like, once teams are remote and people are not working in the confines of like Californian contracts, then we'd see a lot more teams being involved in tier 2. But from my understanding, maybe a different team is, but you guys are with Conviction. That's the only affiliation that I really am aware of. What is your affiliation with Conviction is like right now? Or like for how much you could say?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll be pretty like transparent about it. This isn't like a thing where a bunch of folks are like exchanging like significant resources or money or any of that kind of stuff. It's very much just a collaborative project together where we're kind of
Yeah.
supporting each other competitively as far as like, the social media side. Like we're retweeting. We have a co-streamer that co-streams all of our games who happens to be the brother of one of their players, which is just like a
Yeah.
unique, cool piece of like kind of bonus there. So we actually got him, we got Viper set up with co-streaming for NACL. So whenever he's able to, he can co-stream his brother's games. So there's just kind of like some interesting systemic stuff. And then obviously behind the scenes, like talking to each other about stuff. Like I think I had Sniper reach out and ask some questions about top lane, directed him to like our top lane, like more experts on the coaching staff side.
Yeah.
And also just spoke to him myself about like, hey, what champs are being played in LCS scrims? Like, is there anything that we're missing? That kind of stuff. So a
Yeah.
lot of it is just very like social conversation, that kind of stuff, and then just general support on, the front end and the back end. So obviously as the year goes on, it's something that we can flesh out more and do more. I think there was also talk about like potentially looking to activate in person together at some point, because I think a good chunk of the staff for Conviction is actually like in California. They're just not in LA. So
Yeah.
there's like opportunities to do more and all that kind of stuff. It's just very much like we're figuring this out as we go to a certain extent, but on the competitive side, it's a lot of just like doing what we can to just stay connected and give access to each other for different things.
Okay.
But yeah, it's very much that's kind of like what I think most affiliations will look like for teams that decide to do them, because like realistically there isn't, a bunch of extra cash going around that people could just throw around, and there's also not like a ton that a tier 2 team can offer an LCS team other than like access to, VODs or scrims or players or talent or any of that kind of stuff, or just like general support.
Yeah, I think most people kind of expect, or at least I would expect, because I know in Academy, probably the biggest benefit is just being able to watch the LCS team scrims while we're just also running down our own scrims. So is there ever a thought process of using, not Conviction in per se, but you guys obviously have a partnership with them, but like using them so they can have access to your scrims, or more importantly, like you have access to their roster so you can like have a say in what roster they can use, in terms of like, hey, if we want upward mobility, if we want to actually, if we're interested in like what the support player looks like or what this AD carry player looks like, we're interested in you guys picking them up so then we can have a closer relationship with them.
Yeah, so
Them.
this is my unique gripe with the current setup of NACL is the way
Yeah.
NACL is set up is such that affiliation with like player rights is actually like bad, like actively bad unless you're being paid for it, because the biggest like kind of carrot that is attracting investment in tier 2 is the chance to promote, dethrone DSG, and take their spot, right?
Yeah.
At which point the deal disappears. But to get there, you need to be kind of like left unperturbed, getting better throughout the split, being competitive. Which,
Yeah.
if you have an LCS team like looming over you, puppet mastering your roster and yoinking your players throughout the year, that kind of becomes an impossibility. So it's like,
Yeah.
I think if there was a world where like a team was paying for that kind of like service almost to like, ghost operate a spot, that would be one thing. But I just don't think that's like a reasonable setup for most teams, both LCS and NACL.
That makes sense to me now.
Cool. I'm trying to see if there's any more questions for eXyu, because I don't want to keep them too long. So we've been going a
True.
little over the budget. Do you have anything on your end, Raz?
No, that got me all. Like that hit all my points.
Dope. Lawrence, you have anything else you wanna talk about or kind of get on your soapbox about?
Let me see if there's any cool questions.
Yeah, I've been digging through.
Otherwise,
A lot of it's
not
turning into
much.
GM questions and a lot of like random, just kind of like ones that I think me and Raz
Well,
could
what is
probably
this?
handle.
Okay, getting back to the main point, I had Dig Spring is over, but I'm actually extremely. I think Sean's question about what can players and management do to achieve improvement between splits, especially in this long break that we're gonna have, is pretty interesting. I think it's something that I mentioned to you briefly. Obviously going to Korea would be cool, and I think it's something that I would do regardless of whether Dig does it as a team. But I think in building a fandom and building a reason to care, I think it would be cool if or I don't know if not everyone has to do it, but I think it'd be I might do it where I'll just stream 24/7 of what I'm doing in Korea for like a month and then just see how that goes. I think people can just chime in on whether they think I'm working or not. But I think that level of interaction with your fans in the off season and that level of publicity of what you're doing is good. So maybe that'll be something that I look into.
Yeah, I think that's
Actually,
probably like
oh yeah,
the
go on.
best angle for most players is like I think it's hard to scrim not just because like obviously it's hard to motivate the players, but it's also like the part of scrimming that a lot of people kind of forget is like you need a team to scrim against. So like if all of the teams in your region aren't scrimming and like the top teams that are still active are scrimming either each other or are like going abroad to do like boot camps before events and stuff, there's not really a lot of people left and like NACL teams scrim very irregularly because so many of them are like either college students, part-time, like working another job or something else like that. So like there isn't really like a full-time like group of people ready to just scrim, which is like the big advantage Europe has because they have so many ERLs. You can kind of just scrim like an ERL team from a different league. All the things kind of like overlap throughout the year, and there's usually like a handful of teams that can keep the schedules pretty full. But in NA, it's very much not the case. So I think Korean boot camps and like traveling abroad tends to be like the main way that you can kind of like get people practicing between the splits that's constructive in some way.
I actually had a follow up in this. This kind of keeps going back to the Cloud Sidkey interview, but you mentioned how you're contemplating retirement. Where are you at right now in terms of passion with competitive? Because you were just talking about going to Korea. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, two different things completely.
Can't properly answer. I can answer to some extent, I think.
Yeah.
Right now, my passion is low.
Mhm.
I think I need something to spark that passion again. And I think the potential for my passion to be there is it still exists. And I think for me, this off season is just going to be a huge turning point in either direction. I think either I'm going to like full send it and commit the rest of this year, no matter what, to doing my best and competing, or I'm going to call it and hang it up. But I think for a lot of my career, I've like been very hesitant to all in on league. I have tried my best to all in, but I think like I try to live a relatively normal life
Yeah.
as a human as much as you can as a pro. But yeah, I think if I decide to keep playing, I would just need to full send it. I would do something like erratic, like the Korea thing where the stream is on 24/7 or something like that. Something where I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone and really like committing to the idea of like, okay, if I'm gonna keep spending my time as a 24-year-old playing this game all day, like something needs to happen. I can't go if I go eighth again. Like it's just it wouldn't be acceptable.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at right now.
All right. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Because like at least when you were talking about Korea, I was like, oh, that sounds like passion. That sounds like you want it. Okay.
Yeah. Quarter life crisis. Yeah, something like that.
Dude, I
Fucking
swear
quarter life crisis.
I've had like more than one quarter life crisis. We all been there, man.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
We definitely have.
It's like the every half decade crisis in our lives. Cool.
Yeah.
Any other stuff that you guys want to tackle before I let eXyu go off? This is a kind of not just to Raz, but also to the chat. If there's anything or anything that Lawrence wants to get on his soapbox and kind of scream to the masses.
No. I have anything to scream to the masses right now. There's not much to scream about. Oh, maybe like okay. To all the people who think I'm like giga depressed from that interview, there's no gun to my head from John. I'm not giga depressed. I think the interview was reflective of how I was feeling, and it is accurate, but it's not as bad as you guys made it seem. And I think my word choice was important when I said soul draining. Like no one is actively toxic and no one is actively like terrible to be around, but the drain is like something that slowly sucks out of you over time. It's not one instance of something, it's just this long grueling lack of unity and lack of like improvement, and I think that's what was killing me slowly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool. Because yeah, I do think that does help a lot of the fans. Because I know having read like you read a bunch of the threads and obviously some folks like interacting and stuff like that. Like I was very much like, dog, we just like after the match, we like went to the house, watched UFC, a bunch of people ordered fried chicken, and we were just like hanging out shooting the shit. And I'm like, I think people are thinking that like people are getting screamed at here, and like that this is like, like the CV Max clips where the game ends and he's just like rattling off insults at all the players. Like that's very much not what's happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, especially with how like tunneled people are on like the perceived toxicity of other teams. Like I know there's like the Lion like clips that happened like the next day in the match where like the players were telling each other to like shut up and being like pretty confrontational in comms, and then in
Yeah.
the pros interview, Inspire's like that's just how we talk. It's efficient. Like we don't take offense to it. Like that's just kind of the vibe. Which I think a lot of people will, again, regardless of what he ever tells them, like if it's coming from Inspired, people are going to read into it with a grain of salt, which like there's nothing he could do to stop that. But like that very well could be the case, right? Like they could have had a conversation of like, hey, we got a lot of folks here who are like down to be confrontational and direct if that helps like solve problems more quickly. So let's just do it. And that might just be what they're doing, right? So I think it's very hard to like read into it too much. And I think it's important for fans to like not always assume the worst when they see like pieces from other teams or even within teams that they follow that are like negative in some way. Even though I
Yeah.
will jump on the grenade a little bit and be like, obviously I'm not gonna pretend that everything at Dig is sunshine and rainbows, right? Like we're losing a lot of games. Sometimes we have shit days that are sad, and like that is very much like a soul draining experience for sure. Like when you have those really bad days where it's like unproductive and frustrating, like what do what can you say? Like those are tough days. Like we can definitely do better to like try and keep folks uplifted, but going winless for that long, like for like a series win, especially when we're getting game wins, is like extra, insult to injury for a lot of the mentals of the players involved. So it's tough.
Yeah, I will use my own personal experience being relegated from the LCS with Dignitas before they rose up again. I don't know how that happened, but it
Why'd you
happened.
kill Dig the first time, Raz? What happened?
Wait,
Dude,
you relegated with Dig? You were on Big
yeah,
when they got
yeah.
Yeah.
relegated?
2016 spring. It was actually there was like visa problems. So I was even I may not have been able to be on stage multiple times. So it's like there's that. There was also a roster swap with our top laner. There's just a lot of drama within the
Yeah,
team.
it was
And
it
then
was a
like
tumultuous one.
and the worst feeling was that there were so many games that we had massive leads, like 3 or 4 on stage, that if we won those games, we would like we would absolutely not even be in the relegation zone. We would be in playoffs, or we would just be in like the safe spot, like in the middle, where we're just waiting for next split. And then you're like always so close. Raz was a pro? No, I was a coach. I was a coach for that team. And so it's like we're always so close, and then the loss stacking up is soul draining because like even if we all have great relationships within the team, and I'm good friends with those players. What you will still remember is the loss after the loss, the disappointment after disappointment, and it is fucking soul draining. Like, it just is. There's a reason why I'm not a coach anymore. I fucking hate that shit, man. Like my heart can't take it anymore. Like I actually could not take it. Like when you're succeeding, it feels like the best shit of all time. And the same thing, Jonathon was my GM on Golden Guardians Academy. When you have great scrim days, you feel like amazing. Everything is great. And then you have bad scrim days where it's like you go in and bot lane is perma losing, and it's like we're not getting any like actual good conversations out of it, or maybe I didn't facilitate a conversation well enough, and you're like, wow, I came out of that one and I feel like shit, and I'm gonna go home and I'm ordering McDonald's and I'm just eating myself to it. Like the hell, like shit like that happens. It happens. That is 100% the reality. So yeah, I feel that. I understand it.
Yeah.
It's tough. I think on the management side, it's even funnier too because like of all three of the roles, like player, coach, manager, I have the least agency of any by far to impact anything, right? It's like once I've set up the pieces, whatever happens is just kind of up to like I would say 80 to 90% the team you've assembled and what they do, and like maybe I can have some like minor 5 to 10% at most impact of like trying to facilitate something, being like an extra person in the room to support the team, like doing those like small extra things that the players may or may not even notice or mention. And like that at a certain point, if you've lost enough times, it you either become numb to it or you just become like addicted to the moments where it is truly great. Like I think for context, I'm definitely the one who becomes numb. Like if you see the coach cams they show on stage, it literally looks like I just saw like a ghost in the room. Like it looks like
Yeah.
I'm no longer in my body. Like I'm just a husk, and that's just from years of like being backstage and watching whatever happens and being pretty powerless. And for like one little nugget of crazy John lore before I let eXyu go here, for the Overwatch fans in the chat, many years ago there was an infamous C9 play where a player stepped off the point and lost the game because they weren't contesting, and that became referred to forever in the history of Overwatch as C9ing for stepping off the point. I was the manager in the back room for that team when that happened in Korea. And
Nice.
no one will believe that I was there, but I promise, and it sucked.
Yeah.
But with that, I will let Lawrence go. Thank you so much, eXyu, for coming on and kind of chatting with folks and answering some questions. I know there's been a lot of questions and a lot of chatting, so I will let you get to the rest of your night so you can recharge for tomorrow where we will have more scrims.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me here. This was fun. It was actually pretty
Thank
fun.
you.
Yeah, I
All
want
right,
to do
see you
more of
guys.
these next split. So hopefully
Yeah,
we
Oh,
get
yeah.
more players
I'd be
involved too.
down for something like. Yeah. All right, see you guys.
All right.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
And then there were two.
And then there were two. But yeah, I think in general, I would say like my biggest like stressor when I saw that interview was like, was there something like was this a traumatic thing that was happening that I didn't know about, like what was going on, and we like talked about it, and he's like, oh no, I was just like, it's just the vibe was bad. It hurt to like go through scrims and like have it not get better and like have the results not pan
Yeah.
out and like all the work that puts in, right? Like it just sucks. And I think the fans kind of just took it and ran because again, we kind of talked about it before, but like the average fan when they hear like remotely negative sentiment, they don't go to like the human side. They go to very much to the like the scandal, the like clickbait, the rage bait, and they're like, oh, well, like let's assume the worst. And I think
Yeah.
that really kind of let the mob run wild for sure.
Absolutely. And the real question is, do we have questions for the both of us that we can hit on?
Yeah,
And
let me.
I have some takes as well or like questions as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna dig back a little bit because there's a few that I think I either skipped or didn't notice when I was scrolling through. Don't worry, no one saw it, Raz. You're good.
Nice. Oh my God, it just came flying at me. Fluing, it came flying at me. And it's a dark room.
Yeah, so now it's just gone.
Found it again. Nice.
State goals. Okay, this is actually a good question. So for GMs, how do you publicly do the trading players song and dance? If you shit talk players publicly, they will play worse. So how do you walk that line? So I'll give my 2 cents on this, which is like behind the scenes, I think everyone will have their biases. They'll always talk shit, and like I think a lot of people do it in a very like I'm just telling a joke kind of way. So like even if you have players on your team that are like, "Oh, I'd never work with this guy." Sometimes you get to the point in your career where like, fate puts you and that guy on the same team and it's now
Yep.
you have to make it work. And I think a lot of the times that those happens, the players end up realizing, "Oh, maybe they're not so bad." Like I think there's like polarizing players in the league like Inspired where it's like there's nothing I could say or do that would change someone's perspective on Inspired as a player. But like
Yep.
everyone acknowledges like yes, he's very good. Yes, he's very polarizing. He's blunt to the point where like some people might probably not handle that well. So like the question is less of like, shit talk and non shit talk, and it's very much like would you ever want to work with a player like that? And that's the question you have to ask for each individual player. And like you could walk the line publicly to try and like go around it and things like that. But I think the reality is like I think pros are pretty professional about this kind of stuff and they can acknowledge like where the line is between true like, hater stuff and like actually, acknowledging like strengths, weaknesses, faults and all the rest of it. But like I think a lot of it also gets obfuscated with agents where like a lot of the agents do a lot of the work for them so the players kind of just come in at the very end of the process to be like, "Hey, I was
Yeah.
interested, my agent got the conversation going." And now you're at the
Yeah.
point where you're interested enough to take a call with me, right? And so like it's it's a very interesting process, but I think very few GMs will go out and like publicly flame players to the point where like the GM is now like a known adversary of the player. That's like very, very rare for a lot of intentional reasons, but also because like it's just a bad look too. See if we got any other questions in here
Yeah.
that are more conversations sparking. Will we be for funning the draft this last week? No. Our goal is to try and still perform. I think the only thing you can really do in a situation where you're mathematically out is to play spoiler, even if it doesn't actually matter, just to prove you can do it. And I think that's very much the goal of most teams in our situation. So that's very much what
What
we're going to
can
try
you
to do.
what can you take away from the final series? Because it feels like that's probably the dead zone of your hopes and dreams of making the playoffs are gone as a team, but there's still a good amount of information you can get based off of how like players work alongside each other. If there's like any um, thing to look forward to for the next split. So like, what would you say is like the value in the last week for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to like the process almost, where it's like
Yeah,
it's less about the result on the weekend and stuff, and it's more actually about like the scrims during the week, right? Like if we push harder or like give more leniency around things, like how do people run with that, right? Are they going to actually like do something productive with it? Are they going to be more willing to listen to things that maybe they weren't willing to listen to before? Or is this going to be like, everyone kind of just shows up lifeless and, completely given up, right? Like that becomes the question you have to ask when you go into the scrims and like see what can you actually get out of the players when you're kind of past the point of no return, right? Because this is what
yeah,
also helps inform like this is going to be the last impression we have with each other for the season. So this is going to inform like the end of split questions that we're in conversations we're going to be having and figuring out like what like systemic changes and others that we need to do between the splits to make sure that we're trending in the correct direction next season.
that makes sense. And something that I noticed about you is you're generally, at least in my experience, hands on. So
Hmm.
I would ask more like, how hands on are you with in Dignitas on the day to day? And what's your perspective of like a general manager's role on a team? Because I know that some GMs are just not there, like maybe not seeing scrims, maybe doing something else. And I know general manager as a role is very
It's a bit of a catch-all for
dependent.
sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think to like answer the question of how involved, so I've been a GM in teams where like, or even like an assistant GM in other roles where like the head coach was very much like, I'm in charge, this is my team, and the GM is there to facilitate. I've been in teams where like C9 for example is very unique where Jack is very involved as like an ownership figure where like
yeah,
he is very like invested and will like make things happen to support the team at a level of speed that like the average team if they didn't have as invested an ownership group would not be able to do. And then
yeah,
I've also been in teams where like I get kind of called on as like a resource, right? Like, hey, we noticed that like, XYZ thing is happening and we think like coming from a coach, it's not going to hit the same as coming from you. Do you think you could have a chat with the player? Like those kinds of things. And I think for me, the balance I like to teeter on is like, I'm not going to tell my players or coaches what to draft. Will I give my 2 cents, sometimes unsolicited and sometimes to rage bait them for fun? Yes. But like
yes,
there's no expectation from my side of like if I say champion A, B, or C is good, bad, ugly, whatever, that's going to like make its way into the draft, right? Like there's full
yeah,
autonomy on the coaching staff side and the player side to like draft what they think is good, practice how they want to practice, and I'm mostly there as a resource. And I think for me the thing that I'm leaning more into now that kind of the league has changed a little bit, like on NRG it was very much like we had such a robust coaching staff that like adding another cook to the kitchen, no matter how inconsequential, would like be a little overbearing. So it was better for me to like be arm's reach and play the role of like the neutral third party.
yeah,
Whereas nowadays a lot of this coaching staffs are a little more trim and like lean. So the idea is like, okay, well, now it's less of a problem if they need a resource to like pull me into the mix and have me get more involved. So like currently in our setup in our like scrim review area is like the two coaches next to each other and then me next to them. So it's like all three of us in a row. And so for me it's like, there's times where like a player will want to talk with me in particular and I'll go and talk to them about the team and stuff like that. And then I'll go, talk to the coaches and be like, "Hey, so and so pulled me aside. We kind of talked about, this, so, keep an eye on it," that kind of thing.
yeah,
And then there's times where like I'll give feedback, right? Like if someone gets frustrated in review, whether it's a player or a coach, I might pull them aside and be like, "Hey, you need to chill out." If someone is like, not having like a good, like how they're conducting themselves isn't proper or whatever, and like, the other folks around them have tried to intervene and it's not changing, then that's something that I would jump in and try and help with, right? In the same way that like I'm trying to be as integrated to the team as I can without being like that weird overbearing manager. Because I know historically in the league, there's been a lot of like former pro turned coach slash GM manager turned proper GM type like
Yep.
pipeline going on. And like for a lot of
Yep.
those folks, it's very much like if they disagree with the strategic direction of the team, it is really, 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 really hard to like not jump in and be like, oh my god, why are we picking this completely shit champ? I think it's so bad. We never win on this champ. Like it's so bad.
Yep. Yeah.
And that becomes like a real pickle because like I have talked to coaches who worked in those systems and overwhelmingly they hate it because it either is, everyone listens to the GM that kind of skips their job and just jumps in and starts getting too involved. They either listen to them and it goes bad, and then they're
Yep.
all like, "Man, fuck this guy. Why is he making us do this?" Or
Yeah.
they intervene, it goes well. Now the coach has been undermined and feels like potential some job insecurity or general insecurity around it, and maybe the coach is, gonna overcompensate, or the players will like change how they interact with the coach and the GM now. It just creates like a Pandora's box of problems. So I very much will keep my opinions to like the coaches pretty directly, and like will only really talk a ton of the players if it's like solicited or we're having like a one-on-one chat or something like that. Obviously, I'll always defer to like if the coach says, "Hey, we're doing A," and a player pulls me aside being like, "Hey, I really want to do B." I'm going to be like, "You guys are doing A, man. That's the plan. That's what we're doing."
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to try and, become like the head coach than the head coach, right? Like that's not the role. So
Yeah.
I think trying to find that line for some people can be really hard, and for me, I definitely err towards the line of like doing less than I probably could because I don't want to step on toes, and that's kind of like the some of the equilibrium I've been trying to figure out for this year in particular. Now that I'm working on a staff that has less folks on it, it's more like, oh, I not only like can do more, but it's probably appreciated if I did.
Yeah. That's kind of like a question that I had about overall leadership, because like especially when the team is doing poorly or if there's issues um, with morale or direction, like for instance, eXyu mentioning misalignment on a team about whether we're committing to one idea or another. Um, what is your perception on your small coaching staff and being able to handle that versus you stepping in to handle it yourself? Because that's probably something you're working on right now and trying to understand. But I just wanted to know what your thoughts on are right now.
Yeah, I'll say I think the people who are always the most well equipped to handle those conversations and that process are always going to be the coaches, right? They're the ones who are like watching a billion VODs all the time. They're gonna have the like, catalog in their mind of like, oh, that thing we talked about like doing good around like dragon setups. I watched a game last night in LPL where like someone did exactly what I wanted and like it actually looked impossible to contest them. Check this out. They pull up the
Yeah,
VOD, they show the team, proof of concept, we have the conversation. There's like a thing to now try and emulate, right? That is going to be something that's like not only more well received, but more easily done by a head coach or even like an assistant coach, like someone whose active job is to coach. And I think it only really becomes a problem when like let's say, you're on a team and the head coach is like, we must do this every game no matter what. And then there's someone who like breaks rank on the player side and is like actively protesting it, right? That's when you would be like, okay, I need to call in my GM because like I gave like a command to the troops basically as a coach to be like, hey, this is how we're gonna do
yeah,
things, and someone just decided to like try and big dog me and just say like, no, they know better and try and like not be part of the team. That's when you get the GM involved and be like, hey, like if you're asked to do something in the game, like we have to do that, right? Like, if it doesn't work out long term and we talk about it and like decide not to, cool, that's fine. But like we have to at least do the exercise properly to be able to assess as a team as if, if this is something that we want to continue doing or if this was like a failed experiment, right? Like you still have to do the experiment to know if it was good or bad.
yeah. So mostly just conflict resolution. You'd want it to just land on your coaches to be able to handle it, and you feel like it has been. How do you feel like it's been done so far?
Yeah, I think in our team
Which
it's
is a
been
loaded
pretty
question.
it's been pretty good. Obviously, yeah, loaded question given the context, but I think like
Yeah,
totally fair question, right? Like I think a lot of it does come down to like outcomes are always going to look worse than processes if the team isn't doing well, right? Like we could
yeah,
literally have resolved, 10 plus conflicts, but if the results at the end of the day are us losing on stage, it's going to be hard for the fans to like say like that progress was made. So I think for us, we definitely took longer than we probably needed to like isolate some of the sources of where like the misalignments were coming from to then go and start handling things, which I think that was probably like the greatest miss for us because like I think we had a few very like early in the season conversations to be like, hey, in game, like so and so called a thing. Someone called it off because of some other reason, and so we kind of just ended up doing nothing when we could have tried to do something in the game. And then we kind of like go and diagnose like, okay, why did that happen? We look at the game state, we look at it from like the purely gameplay perspective, right? And then if that conversation doesn't go well, we then have to have a question of like, okay, let's now figure out like, was that like how you see the game is different? Was it like, oh, you just
Yeah.
misread the situation? Like really isolate down like why did this disagreement in the game happen and what's the solution moving forward, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's ultimately the hard part. And I think for the GM, it comes down to like me being in the room and paying attention to as much as I can have visibility and listen to. So like I hear all the reviews and all those tough conversations when they happen. And so then I become like another person and another viewpoint to then help work with the coaches after to be like, hey, I noticed this person like wasn't engaging with the conversation once like we, didn't engage with their opinion on it and kind of just like pushed forward of like this is how we want to do things anyway. So
Yeah.
clearly like they value being heard. That's something we now need to like find a way to incorporate even if we don't necessarily take their idea. And so like we then have to build like I don't want to like go too deep in the weeds and call it like a psychological profile, right? But we need to understand like how each person on the team like enjoys receiving feedback. What is the best way for us to kind of not necessarily change their mind, but have them be, open and like to other perspectives. And maybe, if we feel someone is wrong but being stubborn, should we, engage with them right away? Should we give them a minute? Should we like kind of go through the team review points and then come back to them on a one-on-one basis away from the team afterwards? Like truly figuring out like what is the best way to reach the players and get the outcomes that we want, because ultimately that's how you drive change within a team.
Yeah. Let's see if there's any more questions on. There's quite a few, I think.
Yeah, I think we've had some new ones trickling in.
Noise.
Um, All right, a question regarding MVP convo and narratives. For Raz, it felt like the conversation got started in a bit of a sudden fashion, and the audience was almost asked to choose from Jose inspired from Vulcan. And then for Jonathan, how much and in what ways do team management and players view the MVP and All Pro votes?
Ooh,
This is a good one.
that is a really good one. I think it's because, well, funny enough, when we did that 3-person voting thing, we're trying to be a lot more, I think, interactive with the audience. So, like for instance, like voting, letting the chat vote, all these things. So the funniest thing about the restrictions of letting the chat vote is that I'm pretty sure they can only vote between 5 things. So it's like we need to now, as broadcast members, whoever's sitting in front of that screen, be it me, Azael, and I think it was Emily. Who do we think are the 3 people do we want to center that conversation around? Could have done 5, but then you start having too convoluted of a discussion when you probably have like about 4 minutes or 3 minutes to have that talk. So for us, we're like, oh, these are the 3 people that we think are kind of like in the running, and that's not even mentioning like Thanatos or and also the last 2 weeks had all the best teams face each other, or even the best players on the worst teams go up against each other. So I feel like usually you don't have a clear idea who an MVP is or All Pro is until the last 2 weeks in this case because of how the matchups actually happened. So the best way to kind of talk about it is make it not feel sudden, because the entire split, honestly, we were just glazing like Jose Dioto and there was another player as well, because Vulcan, yes, was like the last 3 weeks because of him having perfect splits, but I mean perfect weeks in terms of like KDAs, but that's like a product of yes, he is doing well, the team is doing well, he's playing enchanters, he's probably not going to die, but like that is like an audience reaction to that. And who else was it? Inspired because of the fact that he was the previous MVP and he was doing well this split, and even though he had like his team is not doing as well as people would want him to, and he had, I think, a bad game, hilariously enough, versus eXyu, and eXyu won player of the game for that. People still recognize the last 2 weeks he's going up against Jose Dioto, and the team is looking really good, and there are a lot of insane moments. So it's like, I would say it's personal opinion of the people who are sitting in front of that chair to be like, this is who I want to talk about, and this is who my MVP prospect is that's why you're seeing those 3 people. but a lot of it is carrying over from the prior weeks. So that is how you talk about MVP. Also, at least for me, it feels like the split has gone by really quickly. So like being able to follow up in a lot of conversations or narratives is pretty difficult to do so. And we yeah, especially when we're talking about like let's talk about All Pro. That really usually doesn't happen until the last 2 weeks when All Pro is very much relevant, and you don't want to do that in the middle of the split or at the beginning of the split. Sometimes the producers will like, "Do you guys want to have a discussion where it's like you're too early MVP discussion?" I was like, "Well, sure." But it's kind of baked into the title, which is it's way too damn early, and it feels like we could be using this spot to talk about something more substantively. So that's my reaction. It feels rushed because the season's ending, so it feels more um, relevant.
Yeah, I'll also add in some sense here because I think with the way the format works in particular, where not only is it 7 weeks, because like obviously in the heyday when there was
Yeah.
10 teams, like it was usually like a 9 or 10 week season, so we had a little more time to kind of like let it simmer and percolate a little bit and figure things out. But also because it's single round robin best of three, we're kind of seeing this now in the final 2 weeks, where the bottom four teams are in like a fucking 2 week battle royale amongst each
Yep.
other, and the top four are in the same boat. Now it's like, okay, well, we're now in the 2 weeks before the end of the season where like we should be talking about like all pro and MVP and all these accolades and rewards and things that we're doing. But the season ends in 2 weeks and we still haven't seen a lot of the top teams in the standings actually play each other to know like how do they match up. And obviously the timing's perfect where it's the end of the season where their form should in theory be the best. And also, folks have made their like the playoff rosters are locked. There's been a move that happened for, DSG moving Castle to Lion. So does that make them better? Now we get to actually see them play each other a little bit and see like, okay, what actually is the outcome of that? And so like that can then inform things, but we kind of still have to have the conversation now, even though those matches haven't happened, just by the nature of the format and how the schedule panned out, which
And
makes it
you're
feel a
Mr.
little rushed.
Format, which people don't really recognize. Like you are. I don't know how much you want to say, but like you have done a lot of work when it comes to figuring out the best format. And so like you are probably the most well equipped person to have this conversation. And I felt it immediately. I want to say for this last week's story meeting when I was going into it, I'm like, usually in the last week you deeply talk about the playoff run
Yeah.
because usually everything gets sorted in the last week. But yes, it is best of three, single round robin. So a lot of the conversations you would have on the last week normally you're having on the second last week because it's getting decided in the second last week because yeah, it's best of three and game record isn't necessarily something being followed. So it's just purely about how a team wins or loses series wise until it goes into the other tiebreakers, which are really convoluted. So it's like it means a lot more a lot earlier, which catches you off guard.
Yeah, and I think that is very much kind of like the thing you have to kind of wrestle with a little bit with these kinds of formats is also like, imagine in an alternate timeline, right? Where like the first week we had beaten Shopify, right? Now Shopify would be basically going into that most recent week would be completely winless and would be like narratively in the like you must win 2 games or it's doomed.
Yeah.
And so like that's one game difference because there's only 7 games being played, and because of how the schedules worked out for most of the teams is like at least for us in Shopify we played each other early and then no other bottom 4 teams until literally the last 2 weeks. So it's like the schedule just happened to land in a way where like it helped and hurt a lot of different narratives happening at the same time. It also reinforced things, right? Like, a lot of people kept seeing C9 win games, and like some of them were like a little rocky or a little inconsistent, but they were, at the end of the day, they were scoring the win. And so the question kind of became like, okay, well, when does the gravy train end, right? Like, when do they eventually get to, when are they going to play like these, other top teams that are building good records too? And the answer was like, oh, literally the last possible second. Got it. And that,
Yeah.
that always is going to like interfere with the potential conversation. And I will say from the second part of the question that we haven't got to yet, which is how does management and like teams and players and stuff view all the different like votes that happen at the end of the season? I will say fans may not see or hear too much of this, but you might if like you follow players that stream or are more public. I think most players and management and staff on the team side are extremely jaded about a lot of the awards. And the joke we used to always tell was like every all pro and MVP and even like the back when there was like the coaching staff of the year or coaching staff of the split awards too, they were just literally who won more games in the regular season awards. It was just like if
Yep.
your team was first, all 5 of you first all pro ballot send. Oh, you were second
Yep.
place in regular season results, all 5 of you all pro ballot send. And especially when the teams were a little more like top heavy in the sense of like all the best talent would gravitate towards the same teams that were winning everything and going to worlds every year, it became like a bit of a de facto thing that just would happen each time. And then over time, when like talent kind of got like separated onto different teams, and each team kind of had like their person that was the strongest player on their team, you could kind of like make arguments. But I think like we're kind of back to that like very saturated top end, right? Where like Lion on paper is like a ton of big names. So I think anyone would be surprised to not see a bunch of their like more like outspoken and known players who have like historically won a lot of these awards, similarly placed high up on the ballot. And there's very few teams that have like weak links but are still winning. And so like that historically in the past would really make the all pro votes extremely homogenous. Where like, oh, C9's in first, every C9 player is number one. Oh, TL's in second, every TL player is second, and that became like a bit of
Yeah.
a thing. I think MVP is maybe the one where like that one's been a little more clear. Like people put more thought into it and would award like even if the team didn't win, but like they were the reason the team was even in the picture in the first place. That player could kind of get their shout out. But like I think part of the reason the coaching staff award was similarly kind of like removed over time was just there wasn't a lot of access to see what the coaches were doing, and it became the like, did you win more regular season games? Like I think the one time we won it on CLG was the one time where we were like, thank God, because like that was a team where we weren't expected to do well and we pulled it together and it was summer split. So it was like the perfect recipe to win that award and we actually got it.
Yeah.
But there's been plenty of years where like a team did really well against expectations, but then there was a team that like only dropped a small handful of games and so their coaching staff just won for free even though they had like grossly overspent compared to the other teams in terms of like the budget of players and talent they brought into the team and were like the expected favorites. Whereas like the fans could probably make the argument that the coach probably wasn't like the massive like contributing factor to the team's success, but they prevented it from going below expectation, which like I don't know if you want to give them an award for that, but like it's definitely like the best you might be
Yeah.
able to do from an analyst perspective where you don't have that insight and can't see scrims and don't actually know what's going on behind the scenes.
I'll say my perspective on it, especially the coaching staff of the Split Award. That one is just demonic. It's weird because everyone will have their own understanding of what that award is. Like for instance, there will be one groupthink, which is I think the more dominant one, which is the smartest team? Which team plays the map better? Or like is so it's like okay, so their best coach. But a lot of the times, especially in the FlyQuest era that had inspired, I'm like, this is just becoming more of a this team has inspired that tells this team what to do within the game, or Bippo that tells this team what to do within the game. And I don't know what the fucking coaching staff does. So it's like this is less of a coaching staff thing and more of a the players are smart about how to play mid to late game. And then there's the other group think, which is I think the more valid one, which is expectation versus reality.
Yeah.
Like this team was expected to do like to not be a great team at all. But they seem to be a greater sum of their parts and got third or fourth in a split where people expected them to get seventh or eighth. And you're like, oh, this team just something had to have been clicking. But yeah, we don't know what's going on within the team, but we know that it seems to be working very well and they're taking names off of the better teams in the league. So it's like that one is for sure. I love the example of the CLG example because like, yeah, CLG felt like that team because you see the storm of coaches coming out of the room. They put in a lot of investment in their coaching staff, but also you just had a team that very much had a good idea or not a good idea, but like a
consistent like idea of like an identity almost. Yeah.
An identity, a consistent view of how to play the game that regardless of win or loss, you knew that was going to be the pure identity and goal that this squad had. And it felt natural. So I'm like, yes, this is a perfect view of this team. But the problem is whenever you have that view of the team, you're like, okay, this is a great team. And it's usually like 100 Thieves or something or a CLG. But then you're fighting with another team that is just simply a better team on the map. That is, you could tell, the team that has been paid the most. It's like, this is the wallet team, and this is the team of like a band of bros that for sure have a great idea how to play the game which one wins out, most of the time it's just the team that got paid $1 billion is first in the league and has the better players. And you're like, well, this fucking award sucks. That's usually how I view it. And if you look at my votes, a lot of the times, like, I will make it so the third or second best team is the Band of Bros team. But I always be like, I don't know this team well enough to know if it's just simply their players dictating everything or if they're coaches. So I'll just say the team that I think has the best view of the map, which ends up being the first or second best team, which sucks. Like, yeah. So, and I never want to be the guy that's like, I may not know what their coaching staff does, but I'm going to assume because they have fucking Inspired or Blabber on their team or Vulcan on their team that they do all the work. So I'm just, no, I can't make that assumption. That takes away that from a team, especially when I know that some of the way these contracts are orchestrated, like they make more money if that is, if they win that award or don't win that award. So it's like, why would I make them lose that award based on an assumption that I have no idea on? So it just blows.
Yeah,
I think that entire circumstance sucks.
It gets really in the weeds. I think the coaching staff one, I totally understand not giving, unless there is a team that like fits that mold of like they shouldn't be as good as they are and yet they are, right? And
Yes.
it's like it defies expectation. Like I think FlyQuest is a good example right now of like going into the year, everyone was like they're gonna be bad at the beginning, and then maybe they'll get better. And then they came out and were like deceptively cohesive. Quad and Masu really stepped up to like give that team a really high floor in terms of just like early game, and then they kind of ran with that. And like, okay, cool. I think obviously individual player nods to those players should probably happen in All Pro, but the problem is that team's probably not going to finish top 3. And so someone has to, snub someone from a top 3 team to slide like a Quad or a Masu up if they want to give that nod, which then feeds into the constant problem of like giving awards, which I am the biggest hater of how a lot of it's been done in the past, because like behind the scenes in scrims, like especially you'll see certain players are just really mechanically kind of running it down in scrims, but then on stage they lock in and like, play to comfort and stuff like that to make as less mistakes as possible. And then then they get the award, and we're sitting here like, looking at our stats in, scrims and stuff like that, being like, this guy is running it down every time we play them. Our mid laner is better than their mid laner, or our bot lane is better than their bot lane. And it's like, it makes people hella salty on the team side when they like see who the weak links are on the team, and they just kind of get the rewards anyway.
Yeah, those awards are hilarious. Anytime I look at the ballot, because it's the number one thing I care for, I always come out with a few takeaways. It's gotten better, but the media votes I always fucking despise. Dude, like
some
half
of the media votes are diabolical. Like I remember we were giving some crazy things, and it messes with the points too, because like the like balance of how many teams were and like things were voting. So it'd be like, every team would get 2 votes because it's like a player rep and a coach rep. And then you would have like most, if not all of like the recurring like analyst-esque people and the casters. And then like there was like random like members of production that used to be on it back in the old days when like there was really a ton of people voting. And so there'd be like random producer on the broadcast is getting a vote, and everyone's just kind of like, why are we giving a vote to Todd? Like what's Todd got to say? Like, and that became a whole thing. And then you would get like press, but then the question was like, which press should we allow in? Because if, let's say there's like 20 something interviewers, there's no way we could let press be the same percentage of votes as like the players and teams combined, right? Like, and so that
I had a problem.
Create a lot of stuff.
I had a problem where it was like, at first this is back in 2020, when a lot of press was being allowed in, and I was like, this person is a Latin American press member and he is voting for all the Latin American players. Or I looked in Europe, it's like, this person is literally a Greek publication voting for all the Greek players, and I'm like, this makes no sense. We got to stop this from happening. And I think that got a lot better. I think the broadcast can be groupthink, which is not good because we try to actively not be groupthink. But the problem is we come into work and we have just like literal debates in like story rooms and of course the green room. So like oftentimes if they come out with a resolution, that means they also come out with everyone voting the same way, or similarly, at least similarly. And then the players, for me, I look at the players recently, I'm like, oh my God, that player is trolling out of their mind. But I know it's because they're taking scrims into consideration. There was one time, ages ago, 2020, I still will go back to 2020, where it's like, Dardoch got kicked from Dignitas. Dardoch is like 3rd all-pro jungle vote from Blabber. And it's probably because he's like, when I played him in scrims, he was the 3rd best player. So he's viewing it from like, instead of like someone who played throughout the entire split, because he got kicked out like at the beginning or half. He's halfway through the split. He's like, this is still the third best player that I played against. So I'm like, all right, well, it is what it is. You can't say too much about that. So, yeah, and that's just, and then at times I'll have the suspicion that certain staff members from certain teams are like gerrymandering the votes to make it for their players.
I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. I've looked at ballots. I think there was one person who did this, and like I could give them the benefit of the doubt because that's just how they are. That's like when Peter Dunn was working for EG. I looked at his votes and I was like, you know what? I don't think that's collusion. I think that's Peter Dunn being Peter Dunn and just living his truth. But there were times where like there were, former coworkers that had like worked together on a coaching staff that are now like separated, and you could tell they were like their player was like maybe on the bubble, right? Like they have like maybe a third or fourth best in their role player.
Yeah.
And so for that position, they like completely inted the vote, right? Like they would vote for players that had no chance of getting top 3 to like increase the odds by just like almost omission that their player would like slide up the rank because they didn't have to give their points to like their best competition. And I saw it and I was like that's nonsense. And I think I was talking to some folks in like the LEC and I think they started like noticing it happen so much that they had to like try and find like almost like a countermeasure to be like, if someone does this and we suspect that they're doing this, at what point do we kill their ballot and take away all their vote power? Right? Like at what point do we just say this ballot no longer counted because you were doing some nonsense?
Yep. No, I feel that. When I saw it, because there'll be some people who are like, okay, they just have an interesting view in the game. And then I swear, I cannot remember which year it was, but I saw one coach do it, and I'm like, this guy must get reprimanded. Take away his votes, please. I'm begging. But yeah, that 100%. I know what you mean.
But yeah, it was always a crazy one. I'm gonna go see if we have any more questions. Okay, this one actually was I wanted to answer. So, what's your snack strategy for between games? Because David Shydock started doing like snack like rankings where like, the broadcast would like pan to the teams as they're like outside on the picnic tables or whatever. And I feel like we're automatically slated to like lose this match because where we do the huddles between games is always in the team room because one of our coach our coach basically brings his like ratty old crappy laptop and Swiffer's just sitting there like during the game plunking away on it. And he's just sitting there like doing drafts. And then between the games, we bring the players in and show them like, hey, here's what I've been working on. It's way better than like free-handing it on like a piece of paper or something.
Yeah.
And then we talk through the game. And also we have the replay on like one of the computers that we can like skim through and show like, hey, we need to be better at this next game. That being said, you don't then get a wide shot of like all of us hanging out with the food spread. Every week, things I like to do. Bananas. Classic esports food. You got to do bananas.
Yep. You need it.
But I will say our team is unique because they're bad at eating food. So if I did the fly quest where I brought like a giant fruit platter, that fruit platter, 80% of it is coming right back home with us untouched, at the very least. So you kind of have to cater the snack strategy to the team you have. So like FBI, notoriously bad at eating food on game days, but will drink liquid calories. So like if it's if we've been experimenting with like those like naked smoothie things, like the little like prepackaged like smoothie that you could just buy at like a convenience store or something.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get one of those because he's a big like juice smoothie kind of guy, and then also like protein shakes just to like get something into him. There's also bananas is the classic one. I think most players will eat bananas. We also pack food from earlier in the day. So for the players who like are bad at eating lunch and stuff like that, whatever goes like uneaten, usually it's like a breakfast sandwich kind of thing. We'll pack them with us to bring to the studios, so we have like more like hot and ready to go food. We'll also Photon is a big fan of blueberries, so I will buy him like a little thing of blueberries and wash them and like get like a cup full of blueberries so we can just sit there and like nibble on blueberries between games.
Yeah.
And then obviously Riot usually has a good selection of snacks that some of the players will pick away at, but I think generally the bananas, blueberries, smoothie / protein shake is like our go-to along with like our food that we have prepped kind of going into the day. But if I brought any more than that, I'm guaranteeing you it's all coming right back home in the same bag, untouched.
That's tragic. Which is tough
because it means I can never win the David Shydock like food tier list for teams between games because I could make the nicest spread you've ever seen with like little like deli sandwiches and fruit spreads and platters, but it's just gonna go untouched and then it's gonna get wasted. Like
yeah. For the broadcast, we have. I mean, you'll also probably have noticed it. Like we'll have lunch at the studio. So you can like if you're probably coming in on second series, you can just go out to where the staff is getting lunch from, and it's pretty good food. That being said, the snacks are good. They're fine. I'll always have a snack. Like I'm bad at drinking water, but I'll always get like the full on lunch or Coke or whatever to just like get me. Maybe if I'm desperate, Red Bull. Um, just so I can have like continued energy. The person who's bad at this is Emily. Dude, Emily just does not eat on broadcast. I mean, on broadcast days. She'll maybe before the broadcast, she'll have something like breakfast, but if she forgets to eat in the morning, she is not eating throughout the day. Like it is actually a thing that we constantly like try to get her to stop. I mean, to start, but it's a thing of like nerves for everybody, right? It's like I don't want to eat if I'm doing work because that'll probably fuck with my stomach. It's like, okay, well, but if this is a long ass day, like international events, then you're
You're gonna be
you're
dead
just
by the end of
doomed.
it. Like it's gonna be
You will be
bad.
dead. Yes, you will be dead. This will happen. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
a thing for
that's.
the
I
broadcast
think
time.
a lot of players are similar to Emily in that regard, where like it's stress, they're anxious, like the like stress hormones are flowing. Total
Yeah.
appetite suppression, right? Like they're just there's not even like a flickering idea in their mind of like I should eat food right now. It's like the last thing on their mind. And so like between the games, I'm like the parent that like is being like, "Oh, you've lost weight since I've last seen you. I'm now going to stuff you full of food." That's literally me between the
Yes.
games being like, "Please eat half a banana." Like grab a banana with a friend, split the banana, I don't care, just eat something, right? Like get
Yes.
something going because like the biggest struggle with players is like on game days, usually we actually have to wake up. If you're game one, you have to actually wake up a decent amount earlier than you would on a normal scrim day for a lot of teams. And so like your day's kind of thrown out of whack. And some players are, I should say most players, are not morning people. They are very much the stay up till 3 in the morning, wake up at 11 kind of people. If you leave them to their own devices and don't have like a day planned around that they have to like adjust to.
Yeah.
So if you, the prospect is you need to go to the studio and be there by like 11:30 or noon or 1 or whatever, it means that you are going to have to like make them eat food before they leave or like try desperately and fail to feed them at the studio, and it is
Yep.
diabolical. And if your game is like the game before you gets delayed because you're a game 2 and your game goes to 3, like they will hit the wall where their appetite doesn't exist but their energy reserves deplete, and you need to solve
Yep.
that equation somehow.
It's doomed, man. Usually if that happens, it's fucked. It's yeah.
But yeah, it's tough. I'm gonna see if there's any more questions in here. Will Dignitas release more content on their YouTube channel? So we actually do have a good amount of content, but I will say we're definitely trending more towards the short form stuff because A, it's easier to film in bulk and just kind of get a bunch of it regardless of, how the season's going. But also like it's the stuff that tends to resonate better with the viewers and kind of have more people see it. If we do like, a 5+ minute like something or other on the channel, it tends to not have the best discoverability. So it's kind of like the best way for us to reach fans. But I do think like we will have consistent content coming, and I think with Q&As like this, we'll also be able to like chop these up and then make content out of them as well. So for the folks that weren't able to tune in, we can kind of give the highlights, and maybe even post some of the real highlights that are like super funny or exciting or whatever to the street to like social platforms and stuff to just like kind of bring people to kind of watch these live whenever we can. But yeah, we're doing what we can to try and put stuff out there that we think is going to resonate and be like actually watched and not just put out content for the sake of it, just for like the most dedicated fans. Because realistically, like the LCS is going to be a product that we just won't be able to compete with for like giving content about our team, right? Like you're just going to watch the games first over everything.
Yeah.
Um, so weird GM question. As a GM, how do you keep a struggling player focused on improvement and not worried about getting kicked? Also, how do you judge who just needs more time? So this is like the kind of chicken and the egg of the GM thing, right? Of when you sign someone, especially like a younger player, how do you know if they're actually, going to be good eventually, or if they are just someone who needs more time in the system? I think there's never a true answer for this because it is truly like catered to the individual person. But I think like there's definitely players where you can kind of tell just like the mindset and the mentality is one that's going to translate to success, assuming that like the base level of skill floor is met. So like when I was on C9 way back when, we kind of had Blabber who was like signed as like a sub that we were kind of like holding on to after scouting grounds, even though we didn't really have a space for him because he was finishing school, had a great chat with Jack at the scouting grounds draft, and ultimately was someone that Jack like believed in long term, and we were all like, okay, cool, yeah, if that's something that we have in the budget, cool, let's do it. That makes sense. We think he can be good. And then we had a really tough spring season, and we kind of had to make the difficult call of like, do we keep Wiggly? Do we bring in Blabber? Do we try and like 6-man it? Like, what is the system we should do? And we kind of made the tough choice to just bring in Blabber full time and let Wiggly go and explore other options. And a lot of people weren't sure, like, will Blabber be good right away? And I could tell kind of like from like an educated guest perspective, like he was watching our scrims every day, was always looking for like VODs to watch, and was like extremely engaged and was mechanically very good and like an aggressive player. So I was like, okay, this is the kind of player where like if this works, it's going to work. Like this guy's going to be really fucking good. And so we kind of gave him the opportunity, and obviously the beginning was like a little messy. He was like a little rough around the edges where like he just wanted to fight and do crazy stuff all the time and get spicy in the game. But like you saw very quickly that this is going to be a player that makes it. And I've had players where like they've been right on that edge where like you can never actually tell because like stuff outside the game could make them not perform well in the game or like not feeling confident or like throwing a game would like tank their self-confidence, and like that player kind of like teeters on the edge forever, and you kind of just have to decide like, are you going to have a player on your team that is teetering on the edge, or are you going to keep exploring again to try and find someone who is like definitively on one side or the other.
My follow-up question to that is, because I think everyone's surprise was when you came in and the roster was announced. Like I was surprised that FBI was even available. Like that
Me
was
too.
actually crazy.
Me too,
Yeah,
man.
that one is crazy. But I think that people were generally surprised that they weren't seeing like young tier 2 players like
Yeah.
from like over at all. Like eXyu is probably the best example of somebody who's like that, but of course he's had LCS experience.
Mhm.
Um, what would you say is the would you ever be interested in the identity of trying to develop? Because I can, especially with the whole partnership that you have with Conviction, but also
Yeah.
looking into tier 2. And I know you said that you look at tier 2 first. Is that something that you would be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the struggle, right, is we kind of I came into a position at Dig where like the team was not in the best place. The results were pretty bad, the culture was pretty bad. There's like a lot of things to fix. And I think we also had a very intentional goal of like we want to try and hit the ground running and get up to speed with like a high floor so
Mhm.
that we don't have to worry about like what if we take a bunch of gambles on rookies that all don't pan out. Obviously, we're in like
Yes.
the worst case scenario outcome of that kind of like initial process.
Yeah.
But at the very least, we now have players that like we understand where everyone's at, and now if we were to make changes or even fast forward to November and we're looking at 2027, we now have like a foundation that's easier to kind of like adjust from, whereas before it was very much like a lot of the foundation was kind of rocky and we were in like kind of a weird spot. So for me, I'm down to like talk to more tier 2 players, and obviously during this most recent offseason in November we actually did speak to a lot of tier 2 players, right?
Yeah.
And so like for me, the reason we didn't pull the trigger on anyone was simply because we wanted to attract as many strong players as we could and try and kind of come out the gate swinging and be competitive from the start. Obviously, the visa stuff really slowed us down, and then we had a slow start in spring, which obviously with the way the format worked out and the schedule and the order and all the rest of it, on top of just like the issues we were having as a team, kind of created like a bit of a perfect storm for us to not grow. But I think that lack of growth really does kind of push us more towards like, hey, this should be something where like we try and work more of this in. But the problem and part of the reason we didn't do it is kind of the stuff I mentioned before, right? Of like it's extremely hard to have full clarity on a tier 2 player nowadays just because of how
Yeah.
many blind spots exist. And so for me, it was very much like my intention wasn't rebuild NRG. It was very much like each role in isolation is being kind of assessed, and we ended up rebuilding 3/5 of NRG, right? It was kind of,
Yeah.
I don't want to say a happy accident, but it's just one of those things that kind of just happened, just
Yeah.
based on like the players that were available and the people we talked to and like the profile that we thought we wanted to build as a team. So I think that's obviously a struggle, but I think from my perspective, like I do want to try and have more tier 2 players moving up, but the problem is just when I was coming in, like the slate was wiped completely clean, and there was a lot of like true gambles you could take that were, gambles in the truest sense of the word.
Yep.
Obviously, with the power of hindsight, would I have maybe changed my mind on things? Maybe, but like obviously you can never have that hindsight like dictate your choices, right? So I think for us, it's one of those things where like we're gonna keep assessing tier 2 options and like look at development opportunities, but at the same time, like we do want to be competitive and we want to be a team that's like going to trend upwards. And so for us, we're going to keep fighting to do whatever we think makes sense to get that outcome.
All right. I like that answer.
Let's see if we got any more, because I think we're trickling towards the end of. I think a lot of folks have had to tune out 'cause it's getting pretty late, especially on the East Coast.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Struggling player. Okay, why do esports general managers not trade more often compared to general managers from sports? Okay, I'm gonna go on a bit of a tirade. I'm sorry in advance.
I like this.
So in most traditional sports leagues, let's use like the NHL or the NBA, because I think they're like the most simple ones and have like luxury caps that actually make sense and aren't completely ridiculous. When you sign a player in those leagues, technically for a lot of teams, you don't like hold the full exclusive right to that contract. It's like owned by the league and you're getting almost like a rental in a lot of cases or something similar to that effect. But the contracts are like they're all collectively bargained by like a players association of some capacity. They're all very similar. They're structured as like guaranteed money. So like if you see a player that's announced and they're making $1 million a year in a pro sports league, they're making $1 million a year no matter what. They will get that money for the lifetime of that contract. That's not how like pro esports contracts work at all. Most of them are like employment contracts where like you can be terminated early for all sorts of different reasons. There's like severance and buyouts just like you would expect if you were to be like a salaried employee, right? And then there's like extra carve outs to potentially allow like players to get traded and stuff like that within the agreements that kind of are part of the system. But what that means is everyone is working on a vastly different contract template. All of our language is very different, and there isn't like guaranteed income coming to the teams because a team spent more money like in luxury cap systems. So if you are a team that's not spending a lot of money, your contracts look very much like that, right? That they're lower salaries, the buyouts are probably different, and there's not a lot of guaranteed money. The bonus structure is different. They're much more like pared down. Whereas like someone on like a top team that they really had to like fight to get against other top teams in the world might have a ton of bonuses, high base pay, some guaranteed pay, severance language that's much more favorable to the player. So when it comes time to trade, very few teams have contracts that are comparable to each other. So even if you look at this like DSG Lion thing, I guarantee you the average contract at Lion and the average contract at DSG are not even remotely similar. And so like all of those trades end up being like, if there's a good player on a bottom team that a top team wants to grab, they'll just pay them money and take them. Or they'll wait for their contract to expire and just get them off the free market. But during the season, the amount of money that can potentially like fluctuate a budget changes a lot, right? Like let's say Surdy didn't just live in LA and was able to just insta sign and show up at DSG. The prospect of DSG backfilling Castle quickly in the middle of the season is actually really, really, really hard. If you go and look at
Yeah.
tier 2, a lot of the players are either in school, they're like enrolled in a collegiate program with like a scholarship, or they might not be American citizens. So like even if it's a Canadian, you might need to go and get a visa. Same thing with like Latin American pros that we could potentially take from their tier 2 circuits. There's like time and money and effort that goes into getting new players to backfill when you do trades. And very few teams are looking to like one for one trade pieces, right? It's usually like the perception is someone else has a better piece than me, I want their piece, or my piece isn't working and I just need to get rid of them even if no one else wants them. And so you'll see a lot of like drop in pickups, and you'll see a lot of like one-way trade into pick up a free agent, but you will very rarely see like one-to-one trades because we don't need to manage the cap space in like a system that has like salary controls and stuff, right? We're very much like we have a budget that we spend, and so our moves need to stay within our budget, agnostic to what the rest of the league is doing. And that very much changes the like calculus equation of like how trades and transactions tend to go in the sports league compared to like in the NHL where a player may get traded because they were, a little too expensive for a bunch of like rookie prospects because the team was trying to like tank for a better draft pick or something, right? Like none of those systems exist and even enter the equation. It's purely just like our player costs, X dollars and we think is like this level of good. Their player costs Y dollars and we think is this level of good. Will we give them money to access their player, or will they give us money to access our player? And if so, are we getting a player back, or do I need to go get a free agent? How hard is getting a free agent that's good? Will it ruin my season? And those are like the very basic questions, and there isn't much more depth than that. Yeah, that's my whole
That was
rant.
a great rant. I enjoyed that. I
It,
actually did enjoy that.
it drives me crazy when I read Reddit and everyone is just like, using like traditional sports analogies, and I'm like, there's none of those pressures that exist here to do it. Like when we have a bad split, there isn't a person who shows up and gives me a draft pick to get the next up and coming, Jojo Pyun, right? Like if someone wants to get that player, they just offer them. And if you were the more popular and more successful team, you'll probably just get them.
Will you even have an idea of what a player's salary is on another team? I actually never actually thought of this, of a
So
general manager
there
knowing
is,
about another team's players.
yeah, so there's like different layers to it. I think there's some element of like salary transparency at the ownership level in the league, but it's like obfuscated. So like you don't necessarily know the individual player, but you kind of know like the salary range of like a team is spending X amount of dollars on their players, kinda. But I don't know if those even exist anymore. I know a lot of things have changed since I was last in the league, so maybe that's
Yeah.
different now. But obviously, when you talk to player agents, they kind of like give their perspective, which like they're also trying to negotiate with you, so they might like
Yeah.
embellish or overinflate a little bit, but
Yeah.
generally they'll give you like an idea of where people are at. But I think a lot of it is like word of mouth. I think the news tends to spread through like agents for a lot of things. Like a lot of like the sheep esports type leaks typically are like agents when they hear that things are confirmed, they'll do it as like an additional like level of security of like they agreed to terms and so now they leak it to prevent the other team from like backing out. Like if
Yeah.
their client is very happy with the deal, they don't want to like risk time passing by and like bureaucracy slowing things down. They want to lock it in, so like they try and get the public opinion to lock it in to then reinforce it. But like realistically, I think a lot of it is just word of mouth from like players, coaches, agents, and then whatever transparency information we can get, and then try and like reverse engineer with the other pieces of information we have. But it really does depend team to team because some players will have like these crazy gargantuan deals. I know the LEC is kind of famous for this, where like there'll be a player that has like this cartoonishly large salary because it was negotiated like 3 years ago, and this is the third year because they kind of have a lot
Yep.
of different laws around like contracts where like if you sign a 3 year over there, you're kind of in the same boat as like the NHL or NBA where like it's like guaranteed because you can't just no reason fire people. And
Yeah.
so you'll see people sitting on like crazy salaries, and because of that, it like kind of tanks the budget unless that player is willing to like intentionally renegotiate to take less in the hopes that their team gets better. Which I
Yeah.
think the average player is going to look at the length of a pro career and be like, that seems like a bad deal for me, dog. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Um, All right, so this is a good question for you too, Raz. So, what do you think the ideal balance between short form and long form content is? Like, for example, FlyQuest has a ton of short form, but no long form, which I'm personally not a fan of, but I want to hear your thoughts on what is the most efficient. So, I'll let you go first
Uh,
from like the broadcast side too.
I like that. It's a good one. I'm a big fan of short form, but I'm very particular of what kind of short form content I like. I would love short form content that I think showcases a more like funny, authentic vibe from a person. So if I'm getting short form content that's just gamified, something gamified or something that doesn't really, that's like just a small activity or a trend, I'm not really a big fan of it. But in terms of amount, I think you can push out a lot of short form content. So I think I don't really have a specific number value to it, but I think you can push out like quite a few short form content consistently. But then in terms of long form content, I do agree on the FlyQuest example where at least one a week. Because as a viewer personally, I want to be able to feel connected to my team. And if I feel like I look at the YouTube channel after a week and I don't see anything there, immediate disconnection. Because I subscribe to however many different channels from however many different like I love chess. I love basketball. I noticed something that's really funny from uh, there are only so many podcasts I can watch. So I feel like if a team is not pushing out at least one long form content, and I don't know if I should put an asterisk when it comes to like comms because I love comms, but some comms are just too safe. Like I'm hearing comms that don't really give me anything. Like doesn't it feels too samey with all the other comms videos. Then I tend to be I don't count that as long form content. So I think you do need a balance. I think one at least a week is good for me. And when it comes to short form, um, a lot more. But that's hard to say because some teams I feel like don't even have a content person, which gets really tough then to be able to, you know, get the team to give me any level of content. Because then here's a good take actually. Because there are going to be some teams that don't have like a dedicated content producer or a video guy, and I feel as though then what can definitely supplement it is players going out and being personalities themselves and streaming more frequently, and then the team then clipping out moments from their own stream. Because I know that Lion used to do that when they had the Audi and Lions type iteration of that team. And I was like, and that's when they were in Korea. It's playing a lot of solo queues. Like, I like that because then you're getting to see interaction between the players through their own channels, and that makes things a lot more interesting. So I tend to think of that as a good replacement from like a short form content because then the team's actively using their own players' content. But yeah, long way of saying there is a balance. Give me at least one long form a week, but if the players are putting out content themselves, then you don't need to necessarily have the organization put out the short form content.
Yeah, I have a pretty similar take. I think in my experience, having worked with a bunch of like different sized content creation groups within like orgs, like when I was on C9, we kind of had like dedicated people who would like show up and film stuff, and then, we would send those people with like different teams to events and stuff abroad and all that kind of stuff. And there was almost like dedicated, like this person covers this team, this person covers these teams, and that kind of stuff. And there was like almost like an executive producer, like head of creative that would help like run everything and all the rest of it. And obviously nowadays it's very much like an individual kind of gets handed the reins for the most part, with like maybe some
Mhm.
oversight from like a marketing or GM type person. um, I think my understanding of this is like, I think the highest lift thing is like docu-series content, because it requires your content person to be there for everything that happens, be there
Yeah.
during scrims, and then it's a ton of editing, like an ungodly amount of editing. You have to literally
Yeah.
take like hours of you just filming the players just being bored in the green room, waiting for their makeup time and waiting for like, time to go to stage and stuff like that, hoping you got anything funny or usable. And then also taking like broadcast clips of them being on broadcast, or like gameplay clips, and trying to like stitch it all together in a cohesive, massive project. It's a big lift, requires your person to be on site all the time, ton of work. The lowest lift thing is so and so shows up to, either like while you're doing something or like another activity, like maybe you need to get like pictures for something, and you show up and get pictures, and then while you're there you film something funny, and it takes like
Yeah.
30 seconds to like maybe 10 minutes, and probably really quick to edit because the final video is under a minute or a minute max because it's like a short form piece. So I think it's really, really easy to film a ton of short form that's like very like activity based, right? Like we did a bunch of that where we were playing like mobile games. We were basically just getting the players to like guess the names of teams off of like incomplete logos. We were just kind of like doing fun stuff that's very trendy, very like, algorithmically kind of centered, because it's just a good way to get things like out there basically. But the reality of the situation is the docu-series that's like this big huge lift, 90% of the time, if you were a small team and nothing of consequence happened in your team, falls completely flat. No one watches it. And it
Yeah.
feels fucking bad because it's a ton of resource, a ton of time. Like someone on like your content or creative team has put like blood, sweat, and tears into it, and they have to really kill it for it to be worth it, unless your team results are really great. Like I know C9 has Danny, and she's done a great job of like building a series there that people watch, and it's consistent and it's great. But
Yeah.
I think most teams couldn't afford to put something like that together and actually have it be good, because there's just not enough going on. Like I think again, we talked about it before, but like the Lion kind of like docu series is aggressively hate watched to see if this is the week where that all blows up, and also because they won the split. If this team was like, a normal like third place team, fourth place team, kind of like on the bubble of maybe like not being top four, and they were just putting out content left and right that was long form, I don't think the average person would care a ton, and they probably wouldn't engage very much, and they wouldn't get a ton of viewers, and it would feel like a big sink of resource when they could just be putting out a bunch of shorter form content pieces that like highlight, the minutia of the team, or like are clips from like their, maybe like they take something from like the comms file or something after the game and put it with like a clip so you can hear the comms overlaid onto a clip of like a big play or something, right? That would probably perform better than like most longer form stuff. And I've definitely noticed like old school, like what I call like the 10-minute YouTube long form meta of like, you're gonna make a 10-minute video because that used to be like the correct size for the
Oh
algorithm.
yes, you're
Those
right.
videos are
Oh
like
my
hella
god.
dead. That stuff
Yeah,
is
that's
like
true.
beyond dead. No one watches it. It doesn't trend well. No one gets served that content in the algorithm. And so now we live in this hilarious dichotomy where like if you were going to live like the algorithmic life, you live in between the like TikTok, Instagram, Reel, YouTube Shorts level of like, 1 to 2 minutes max clips, usually shorter, or you're listening to like full podcasts and eating meals
Yeah.
and background noise all the time, right?
Some long ass video or the shortest video known to man. One or the other.
Exactly. And so like that very much becomes like the dichotomy where it's like those are your buckets that you can put your content into that will probably have a place to succeed on the internet. And so all of our old traditional long form of like 10 to 30-minute videos are like completely dead. Like 30-minute videos you could maybe make work. Like I know the Shopify like kind of end of split video was like a lot of people were like I need to know what happened. So they watched. And it was a very 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 long video and I think it got like okay viewership, but it like was by no means like, a blockbuster hit. And that should have been a video where like for all the fans out there they're like, "Oh, we love long form. We want like docu-series for every team." I don't want to do the like, the thing that gets like memed by like, the old Blizzard CEO being like, "You guys have phones, right?" about like the mobile Diablo game, but like a lot of the fans maybe personally want it, but I think the average like soft-spoken fan is probably just not going to find or engage with a lot of the content that like the true diehard fan like craves. And that
Yeah.
is like a fight you can never truly win. And that makes it really hard, especially because like the long form content is genuinely like a much bigger lift from like the staff side to actually get done. But yeah, to answer the question, I think there's not a great way to balance it because short form has kind of become king outside of like straight up making podcasts, which I think we're almost at 3 hours. So Loki, we're kind of getting there as.
Yeah, we are. I think we are.
I think we can maybe do one more question, especially if we're gonna rant at all the questions before we okay, this is a diabolical one. How do you see the future of esports, or how should it play out if it were to be more successful? Do you think that Riot or the leagues should make the broadcaster content more similar to traditional sports, or more generally? Also, what needs to change for esports to be brought to a wider audience to become more successful and profitable? Raj, you have thoughts on this one? Otherwise, I'm going to dive in.
Ooh, say it one more time. Let me think.
Yeah. So, how do you see the
My
future of
brain fogged.
esports? Yeah. How do you see the future of esports, or how should it play out if it were to be more successful? Do you think that Riot and the leagues should make the broadcast and content more similar to traditional sports, or more general? What needs to change for esports to be brought to a wider audience and become more successful and profitable?
Needs to definitely be a lot more around personalities, which is it's funny because I would say a couple of years back, it was very much of the opinion of maybe 5, 6 years back, that it needs to be more buttoned up and it needs to be more ESPN like and professional. And a lot of the fans were very much in the world and realm of I care deeply about esports teams and the players that are on the teams. And I think that professionalism lended to what the fans wanted. We are now in the direct opposite where fans deeply, deeply want a more casual feel and want more personalities. And when I say personalities, like they'll think about the people that they currently like, which are co-streamers, or the whole Jinxie tournament being like content creators. But those content creators, a lot of like some of those people who are names were former esports players that streamed and made videos. Like a good example of the whole thought process, because I think right now you're right that streaming is very oversaturated. But it's like one lever of many levers. Like Jinxie became popular mostly because of the actual clips that he had up on TikTok and Reels. I think clips are what really gets you going. And I think a lot of the times, I think my favorite player that did a great job at putting themselves out there was unironically Aframu, because he had his own Discord server with his own community. He had a YouTube channel at the time in which that was, I think, very favorable. And he would like pay for somebody to just be his clipper. And I think having that when you're in a pretty stable situation as a player goes a long way. It's a process, it's a build to even get people interested in you, especially if you're a middling or a startup player. If you're someone that's not really solidified, you need to find an angle, a unique thing about you that gets people to cling on to who you are. I think a successful player in doing that wasn't a pro, but I mean, isn't a pro, but was a pro. Damn, I'm trying. I actually, his name is escaping me at the moment, but he was on the conviction roster. I want to say like last year, wasn't he?
Oh, is it Perry?
Yes, Perry.
Yeah.
And Perry went in that realm of like full esports coaching and content creation around getting casual players around him. So like a lot of his content creation was around him being an incredible solo queue player. And so like that, I think, and the whole coaching business around it really pushed him positively in the content that he created. So I was like, I think just find an avenue and that will make the content fun for you, so it's worth doing as a player. And then B, gets people around you and rallying around you and enjoying the stuff that you do because they feel like they know you as a player more, which goes back to the original question, which is for esports to be successful, people need to know and like you as a player first. And I think when all of the top players sunsetted, and this is also an LPL issue because I know deeply the same things are happening within the LPL when Uzi and Clearlove and all these iconic players are retiring, and the new up and coming players are players that you need to start building up, but are maybe not the natural streamers that got the business to where it was before. It's like, well, that sucks, and it's a process, but you need to start from somewhere. So that needs to happen. And I don't think it needs to be one platform or another. It doesn't need to be streaming, though it is an easy way of getting your gameplay out there. Could be TikToks, Reels. Honestly, it's preferable. Could be having your own Discord community, and so you're talking to your own community, so they just know they feel like they know who you are as a person. Or just even the most simplest thing of tweeting. If a game ends and it's like, I remember Split 1, Team Liquid loses, guess whose Twitter account I'm pulling up first? It's either fucking Impact or APAs. It's like, because they're going to probably tweet something incendiary of like, oh, can't win without me type of thing. Like shit talking or hate watching, and then seeing a player from the previous team being able to shit talk and hate watch with you, that's hilarious. So just being out there in any way and building up from that, I think is a future that we can start with.
Yeah, and I think piggybacking off of that a little bit, I think you covered a good chunk of it, so I won't go too. I'll try not to go too long, but I
Yeah,
think a lot of it comes down to like not trying to be sports because our fans aren't sports fans. They're here for a reason, and it's usually because they either love sports so much they will watch it in any form, or because they didn't really like traditional sports in the way it was put together and they bounced off of it as like either a child or just, growing up and they grew out of it. So like
yeah,
honestly it comes down to like your average fan wants to see like impact on the stage next to the analyst desk talking smack about Team Liquid during a game or like pointing out the core flaws of like that team that because he was on it. Like they want to hear
yeah,
like stuff they couldn't hear elsewhere, and we also need to be able to build the personality, right? Like I think it would be great if Riot brought like teams or players from teams or staff from teams to get involved in like one-off analyst desk segments here and there. Like completely unrelated. Here is like Swiffer to be on stage to talk about like, the TL versus Lion matchup or something, right? Like he's
mm,
completely unrelated, nothing to do with it, but like here's us trying to like build these personalities in the space that are going to be like recurring, right? Like, hey, we talked to him last week, his game is tomorrow, or like, we talked to him yesterday, his game's tomorrow. Whatever the case may be, like try to get people involved to try and like put names to faces and faces to names, because I think the struggle is now that our league is smaller, we have like a smaller group of people to work with, but I still think the vast majority of fans are not seeing a lot of content from like the majority of teams. I think it's very common for like, when we were getting like press requests, for example, it was like people would request eXyu, they would request Palafox, and they would request FBI. A lot of them
yep,
were like they didn't want to risk their press request being towards a Photon or an Ignar and us either saying no, which we never did the whole split. We pretty much said yes to every request. I think the only time we said no was never a no. It was always a, hey, this person has like a feature request and a bunch of other interviews. Can you maybe take someone else? It was always like
yeah,
we gave them something. And like because of that, you have certain voices and people within the league that just kind of have less like I'll call like broadcast equity, right? Where they're not like showing up as much. And
yeah,
I would love a world where like, we have a very recurring stable league of players where like we kind of get to see and hear from a lot of them throughout the year. The downside is, and this is not the fault of broadcast, and the reason I'm kind of bringing this up at the beginning is to kind of like let the other shoe fall on the other side, is the old Travis Gafford boomerang player argument of like there is quite a few players that join the league and don't really stick around for a long time for
Yeah.
myriad of reasons, but because of that, it's really hard to think like, hey, the broadcast should like really put this like power of evil guy on the broadcast and he's gone, he's in the German league and he's never coming back. Like
Yeah.
it's very difficult because like from a sports league perspective, like your average top pro in a lot of sports leagues, they don't go anywhere, right? There's nowhere else for them to go. They're at the top.
True.
And so when you have them come in, they usually last like at least 5+ years, and you get to hear and see them a lot. And if they truly get like meteoric in terms of their size, you're going to see a whole lot from them, and you're going to hear them talking all sorts of smack when they win championships. You're going to see them do a bunch of podcasts and like media appearances and stuff like that. Whereas in a lot of esports, like some of the most successful players are actually the ones you don't get to hear from because that's like the benefit they gain by just winning all the games, which I think does a disservice. Like I love making FBI do content because he's really funny and he's very good and he's
Yeah.
been in the league a long time and he's
Yeah.
someone who I wish was out there more socially on his own. And so if he's not going to do it himself, I will force him into interviews and media and press and Riot and pros and all the
Dude,
rest of
I
it.
agree. FBI is such a funny person.
Yeah, he's genuinely
He's-
hilarious.
Yes. It's actually so sad, but yeah, I fully align with that. I think the boomeranging thing is one thing. I think there's also an aspect of when a player comes into the country fresh from Korea, it's like this person is not comfortable speaking yet in front of a
Yeah.
camera. And we don't exactly know when it's good to go until like we as talent members, I'll only talk about this as like an example. We'll see a content piece. Like I saw Team Liquid content pieces like just Spawn and Morgan going through replays. I'm like, oh, his English is okay. I just have to speak in a way that is slow enough and like understandable. I just don't speak like a French Canadian like Vulcan, and I think I'm okay. Or XQC, and things will work out fine. So that is usually one way in which I get good information, or just have a good enough rapport with the team where I'm just like, I'll just ask the team, be like, hey, is this something I can do? But then you run into a situation where it's like, this player or this team has multiple Korean imports that we can't really like. They're not ready yet or don't feel comfortable speaking without a translator. So that's tough. So now we are probably talking to the same 2 or 3 people. So that can get pretty rough.
That was something I was like aggressive with people. I was like, Ignar speaks English. Please talk to him. Please.
Yes.
Like he's been on so many Western teams. It would be inexcusable for him to not speak English well enough to be on on a camera being
Exactly.
interviewed. Like so like he's definitely someone I try and like push out there. And same thing with Photon. Like I think a lot of people underestimate his English because similarly he's played on a good chunk of Western teams too, especially in Europe. So
Yeah.
like he's even had to contend with the like crazy European rosters where like everyone is just like speaking with all kinds of accents you've never even conceived of before, and like they're just
Yeah.
having to handle it.
Did you hear about the one embarrassing situation that I had with Photon last year when he was on when he just got on a dig? I think I remember. I don't know if you got told about this.
No, I don't think I did.
Oh, Jesus Christ. It was bad for me. What it was, so here's the thing. I think he was fighting for his playoff life. This was in the Shaden era Dignitas.
Mhm.
And they were going up against DSG and they lost. And I was like, all right, well, that fucking sucks. End of show. I'm going to go get changed, see if there's anyone around, talk to, and then I'm going to take a train and leave. So I think I'm walking in the office space, and then I see Photon. Well, first of all, we're on this far end of the office space. I see a yellow jersey.
Oh, I think you might have told me about this actually. Oh no.
And I say, congratulations.
No, dude.
No, because I think it was fucking Castle, but no, it was the wrong yellow jersey. And I was like, no! I just said congratulations to someone who just fucking lost, bro. That was the worst thing. I was so embarrassed. I was like,
yeah, that's brutal.
I was like, if at any point you want to shoot me with a gun, you could definitely do that, Photon.
Yeah, I would take the trade and never come back, bro. I'm gonna be real.
He's like, no, it's okay. And he made a joke. He was like, no, just say it on Twitter instead. I was like, I'm fucking, just kill me. Oh my God.
That is beast.
Congrats to the wrong Korean top laner and the wrong yellow jersey, bro. That one got me.
That is
that
tough.
one killed me.
Also,
I was
I
like,
will
never
say,
again.
It's getting
Yeah.
awful close to not only 3 hours of stream time, but also my bedtime. So I
Yeah,
think
you need to go to
I'm gonna
sleep.
do my little wrap up here. So thanks again for
Do it.
everyone who's been tuning in. I know we've got some folks I've seen in the chat for the entire almost 3 hours. So thanks for hanging in there. It's been a long broadcast. Thanks for the folks who submitted questions. I think that's like the lifeblood of this kind of stream format is like the more people that get to submit questions, the more we have to talk about, the more this kind of keeps going and growing and expanding. And then also shout out to eXyu for making his appearance and probably lasting 2 to 3 times longer than I expected us to kind of hold him on the stream. I was just like, I think it would be helpful if he came and talked, and that he kind of just stuck around. So shout out to him for sticking around as long as he did. And again, thanks to all the fans that watched all of our games and our content and all the rest of it. And I think going into Summer Split especially, this is something I want to kind of continue doing and trying to bring on folks from the broadcast like Raz and other people in the space, like maybe like a David Shynock or something, to just like kind of make this like, I don't want to call this a replacement to Hotline League, but like just like a way for us to give transparency and talk about topics in a way on the Dignitas kind of platform and side of things that gets us more involved in the community, because I think building community is pretty important and something that I think we can kind of uniquely do, because I love running my mouth all the time and just talking about the game and the space and all
True.
the rest of it, and B, because like I think there's definitely like a good opportunity here to kind of give a lot of transparency to the fans and talk about stuff that is like something that they care about. And I think bringing on folks outside of Dig is like a good way to get the ball rolling, and bringing on players is another good way to like get people involved, even if they don't last the ridiculously long amount of hours that me and other people can talk for. So thanks again for everybody for showing up and for supporting, and hopefully we have a banger game against Sentinels this Sunday, and can end the season on a bright spot, even if it was a bit of a toughie.
Hell yeah.
Dope. And with that, I will be turning off the stream. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye, guys.